Alrighty, welcome everyone to the Public Safety and Justice Committee. Call this meeting to order. Um, Approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? And is Councilman Garcia on the phone? All right, just to notify everyone that Councilman Carlos Garcia is on the phone. He's with us. So Carlos, can you hear us?
Yes, I'm here.
Alrighty, great. With that, we'll go with consent items 2 through 6.
I'd move approval.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second on consent items 2 through 6. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries. Now we're on item number 7. One of the things that we normally do is we wait until after the interviews to actually have questions from the audience. But I asked the presiding judge, and he said it might help us to have the testimonies prior. So with that, if it's all right with my colleagues, we'll ask the individuals. We have about 7 cards or so. So the first one would be Janet. If you'd like to come right up here and just basically tell us your name, and you have a couple minutes.
Thank you very much. Good morning. My name is Janet Weinstein. I am an administrative law judge at the Industrial Commission, and I'm here to speak on behalf of Judge Erica Radke, who is a vice chief judge at the Industrial Commission, and she is being considered among your well-qualified candidates to serve as a judge before the Phoenix Municipal Court. I've had the pleasure of knowing Judge Radke since 2015 when I joined the Industrial Commission. She is extremely intelligent, hardworking, but most importantly, she has the perfect demeanor to serve as a judge. When you meet Judge Radke later today, you will see she has a very gentle and soft presentation. And that is really important at the Industrial Commission, where probably 40% of the litigants that appear before the judges are unrepresented, and they're nervous, and she is excellent about reassuring them and making sure they understand the process. At the same time, despite her gentle demeanor, when there is a multi-party litigation and the courtroom is perhaps a little more chaotic, she is very good at maintaining order and, asserting a firm but gentle hand. Judge Radke is extremely bright, as I mentioned. She knows several areas of law. When she came to the Industrial Commission, she had no background in workers' compensation law, which is the vast majority of the cases that are heard there. She not only learned workers' compensation law quickly and gained a really superior knowledge of the area of law, but before she was there even 2 full years, she was promoted to vice chief judge and responsible for training the new judges that came in, both in substantive law and in the procedures before the court. And that's really a testament to how bright she is. She has judicial experience as a FINRA arbitrator, that's the Financial Regulatory Agency. And before my time is up, I just want to say she is highly ethical. She has served on the Committee for Judicial Performance Review, and she's serving now on the Committee for Character and Fitness. And one insight she shared with me was, in terms of hearing complaints about other judges, she realized a lot of the judges are not violating ethical rules, but it's really the optics, the people that come before the judges. And so she is very mindful about...
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Ashley?
Good morning. I'm Ashley Halverson. I'm a partner at Jones, Skelton, and Hockley. I grew up in Phoenix, and I live and work here currently. I am a current board member of Los Abogados and on the Latina Mentoring Project, though I'm here in my individual capacity. I'm here to support the applicant, Mina Mendez. I first met Mina approximately 12 years ago, and I have gotten to know her over the years through our work together with the Latina Mentoring Project. I've been fortunate to have her as a trusted mentor and friend, and I can say that I am not special. I am among many many Latina lawyers and students that she has mentored in our community. She's been the unofficial chair of the Latina Mentoring Project for many years, and she is quite literally the glue that connects Latinas in the Latino community in Arizona, in the legal community in Arizona. She never asks for or even accepts credit for anything that she does and for keeping this organization thriving. I cannot say enough good things about Mina Mendez and the work that she has done for the community and particularly for women in the profession. She's truly the embodiment of what it means to serve others, which I think is a very important quality in a judge. Mina will serve the city with the utmost integrity, and I'm confident of that. She will instill confidence in the system and ensure fairness to all that appear before her. Her application and her interview will certainly demonstrate that she is very well qualified for this position, and I'm just here to emphasize to you all that she's truly a good person. She'll be a tremendous asset to this bench, and you will not regret appointing her. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Manuel?
Buenos dias.
Buenos dias.
My name is, first of all, I want to thank all of you for the opportunity to address you this morning. My name is Manuel Silvas. I'm a native of Arizona, born and raised here. I've been practicing law in the state of Arizona for about 43, 44 years. I have served as a judge pro tem in Tempe for 8 years. I've had the opportunity to meet people from all walks of life during my career. My practice has taken me throughout the state of Arizona, and in those 40-plus years, I've encountered judges from almost every county in the state of Arizona, all the way from city magistrates, justices of the peace, Superior Court, Court of Appeals, and up to the Supreme Court. I'm fortunate to know and work with Barbara Perez-Candola, and I'm here to support her appointment as a Phoenix City judge. I've known Barbara as an adversary and as a friend. I've interacted with Barbara in the past doing jury trials, non-jury trials, pretrial disposition conferences, and most recently working with her down at the jail court. In my experience, I've always found her to be very gracious, professional, and dedicated, and a highly skilled advocate. She comes to you before she's a very well-qualified candidate. The main thing that I see in Barbara, she has a keen sense for fairness. I mean, a very keen sense for fairness in the treatment of people. It does not matter to me who the people are that are going to be appearing before her. She has a respect for the process and the roles that each party plays, not just the prosecutors, not just defense lawyers, but primarily people. Barbara Perez-Candola's agenda is not about power. It's about people and fairness. That's what she's all about. If you have a chance to talk to her and be around her, you will know that fairness oozes her. She treats people with respect and professionalism. Her lengthy and concentrated efforts within the criminal justice system leave her particularly well suited to be a judge. She's never hesitated to change her mind on issues. If she sees somebody before her that needs help, she will do that. She's not a person that does not give second chances. She'll do everything she can, and she will maintain the integrity in the process of the criminal justice system. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Wanda, right?
Good morning, council members. My name is Wanda Wright, and I'm the director for the Arizona Department of Veteran Services, and I'm here to speak on behalf of Patricia George. Patricia George has been a prosecutor in her past experience and now is a community coordinator, and I'd like to talk to you a little bit about her role as an advocate for veteran court. As a director, it's important for us to make sure that veterans get sort of a fair stake when things happen to them, particularly if they come to us with illnesses, injury based on their military service. Patricia has been a wonderful advocate for our veterans during veteran court. She coordinates the court, and she makes sure that, veteran court isn't just an easy thing. Most of those veterans have to go through several months of treatment, several months of therapy, and some community services in some cases to make sure that they get through that path and they make it and they don't have to come back again. Recidivism for veteran court is less than 5% in all 15 courts that we have in the state. She has been really a great partner for our department in trying to make sure that these veterans get the best possible chance again, a second chance again. She's also supported us in what we call the Governor's Challenge, which supports our reduction in suicide prevention for veteran service members and their families. And she really, as a friend and a colleague, I've known her for about 4 years, she's just a stellar individual. And I think it's really important in this kind of position to be a judge for the municipal court, that you have that kind of person who's got the integrity, the commitment, and the service to those kind of people that need that support. She has been a great partner for us. She continues to be a partner for us and is a wonderful addition and asset to the community of Phoenix. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Cara?
Good morning. My name is Kara Highland. I'm a criminal defense attorney here in Phoenix, and I live here in Phoenix. I'm here to support Mina Mendez as judge. I've known Mina for about 5 years through the Latina Mentoring Project. As a person who sits with her on that, with that group, I've seen her negotiate a number of concessions and a number of treaties between different group members. She is one who wants to reach a common resolution for more people rather than have them leaving the room mad. Additionally, I've seen Mina consider taking a position in the therapeutic courts in Superior Court. When she was considering doing that, she reached out to me because that's my area of practice. She asked for all of the research, she asked for all of the information. She did her job to make sure that she would go in eyes wide open, knowing everything that she needed to know. She worked hard in order to make sure that she would be the best judicial officer that series could have. They reached out to her specifically because she was a Spanish-speaking judge, and we don't have many of those in the Superior Court. Mina Mendez is a kind person. She is a mentor. She has mentored countless people over the time that I've known her, including myself. I'm happy to call her a friend, so I do support her for the position of a judicial officer here in the city of Phoenix.
Thank you so much. Nellie? Okay, no problem. Just here for support for Mrs. Mendez. Okay, Vanya? Vianney, I'm sorry.
Cristina.
Yeah. Alex.
Hello, good morning. My name is Vianney Cristina Hurtado. I am a criminal defense and immigration attorney here in Phoenix, Arizona. I primarily practice here in Phoenix, Arizona. I am here this morning to express my recommendation for Alex Navidad for the judicial position. I met Mr. Navidad 10 years ago, and I have known him both in a professional and personal level. He has been my mentor throughout these years of my practice. Excuse me, we have co-counseled cases together, both criminal and immigration. We have worked together in jury and bench trials. And through this experience, I can tell you that he is a zealous advocate for his clients. Mr. Navidad is intelligent, has a great understanding of both criminal and immigration law, has high ethical values, has a great sense of humor, and overall, he would be an asset to the City of Phoenix bench. He's an active member of the community, has been members of different organizations like Los Abogados, and has always volunteered his time in assisting and mentoring law students and younger lawyers like myself. Mr. Navidad's professional experience in practicing in city court, superior court, federal court, and even immigration court will provide a unique and different perspective as a judge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. John?
Good morning. Good morning. My name is John Phelps, and I am currently the presiding judge for the East Valley Regional Veterans Treatment Court, which is a consolidated veterans treatment court for 7 cities. And before that, served 10 years as the Chief Executive Officer of the State Bar of Arizona. And I'm here to speak on behalf of Frankie Jones. First of all, thank you for your service to our community. You guys have a tough job ahead of you. These are all great lawyers. I know all of them, having served in that capacity as Chief Executive Officer of the State Bar. During that tenure, that 10 years tenure, I had a chance to work with thousands of lawyers throughout the state and judges, and Frankie Jones is among the very best. You will see from her resume she's practiced in all areas of law, criminal on both sides, defense and prosecution. She's served in private practice as well. So her command of the law and her competence is extraordinary. But what I want to talk about is her commitment to public service. She has served on virtually every task force and committee and commission at the State Bar, as well as the Supreme Court. And there's a reason for that. She has impeccable judgment, and she has a great collegial personality. And I think those are qualities that you're looking for, in addition to all the other qualities that my colleagues have mentioned here this morning: integrity, commitment to fairness, all of those things. But she has a great way about her in terms of how she works with others. And so I think she's going to be a great asset to the municipal court. I was here last time advocating for her, and I'm going to keep coming back until you pick her. So again, you have a tough job ahead of you, great lawyers to select from. So that's not a bad problem to have. Thank you for letting me speak on her behalf.
Thank you. Jessica?
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in front of you today. My name is Jessica Sanchez. I'm a partner over at Udall Shumway. I am also a former Los Abogados president, but I'm speaking on my individual capacity too. I am here also along with a number of other Latina Mentoring Project women to advocate for Commissioner Mina Mendez. Her resume and her application will no doubt speak for itself, and certainly you're going to hear about her professional experience when you're interviewing her and reviewing her application. Brief background about myself. I grew up in Phoenix. I spent 11 years in your City of Phoenix Aquatics Department. I also interned in the mayor's office and in the city prosecutor's office. So I've kind of grown up in Phoenix. I know that Phoenix is a entity that expects excellence, that certainly exemplifies excellence, and that respects the diversity of its community. And it's in that vein that I encourage you to select Commissioner Mendez. She is not only someone that, again, reflects the diversity of your community, but she is somebody who, in addition to her busy professional career, literally has mentored about 1,000 law students, attorneys, potential judicial applicants, and she personally connects people to the resources that will help them with their endeavors. She's a role model. She's a light to so many of us. She's that woman that speaks to the little voice in ourselves that tells us that maybe we're not qualified to do something. Maybe we shouldn't quite reach for this goal. She's the one that quelches that and really lights a fire and gets, she has helped people to get scholarships, to get into law school, to become lawyers, to become judges. She is somebody that's going to inspire others in your court. So again, she's not only someone that already knows the job, that is a friend to the community. She's someone that's going to inspire those around her to really be better and to continue in service to the community. And I can't say anything more to just support Mina Mendez. I hope you will select her to be on your bench. Thank you so much.
Perfect timing. All right, Nathan.
My name is Nathan Smith. I'm working for Phoenix Rescue Mission, here to support Patricia George. Patricia George has been an amazing advocate from the court side in working with programs like mine and others that are trying to get people out of the criminal justice system, or in other cases out of homelessness if those people are facing situations like that and are in the justice system, and instead of having them go that way, to get into services. And it takes a lot of I think, firmness and a lot of belief in what you're doing in order to bring collaboration between judges and police officers and social service providers, and to have them all unified around one single goal of only putting people in the incarceration system who belong there and getting others out of it. And Patricia George has been an amazing champion for this. She has been a person from the very beginning who's helped, from a prosecution side, build a model that other cities are trying to get. And it, again, takes the kind of person from the prosecutor's office who's willing to see whole situations, who's willing to think globally about these problems, and then is willing to act. And with Patricia, you get someone who's got the drive and who's got the motivation, who's got the intelligence to do those sorts of things. I think in all the times that I've worked with her, she's been extremely responsive, and she's clearly really good at her job, because she's the kind of person where people don't just say, oh yeah, I've never heard anything bad about her, but she's the kind of person where people always say, I hear so much good about her. And so she's clearly very good at her job. She's clearly very good at working both in the courts and with the community and trying to unify us all around one goal. So I couldn't say more to support Patricia George's candidacy for the bench.
Thank you so much. Adrian? All right. Is it Adrian? Adrian.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the subcommittee. It's my pleasure to speak to you today on behalf of judicial candidate Barbara Perez-Gondola. My name is Adrian Reese. I'm currently the Director of Safety, Security, and Quality Assurance with Valley Metro. I had the opportunity to first meet Ms. Perez-Gondola, or BB, in 2012. At that time, I'd been working as a lieutenant in the Phoenix Police Department Transit Enforcement Unit. It was during my tenure with the TEU that I began researching the development of a program designed to address quality of life issues in the public transit system. I realized it would be necessary to have champions from several city departments and nonprofits, social services, to work together to implement such a program. Operation STOP was formed with the assistance and insight from one of the key team players, BB Perez-Gondola. Sorry, I'm very nervous because I support her very much. A multi-pronged approach was necessary to address the quality of life issues and transit safety. The gap in services to those most resistant to acceptance, struggling with possibly undiagnosed mental health issues and substance abuse, was both highly sensitive and special circumstance. We knew the current system was not working, and Ms. Perez-Gondola approached this very challenging task with integrity, compassion, and an understanding of the judicial process that would make the program successful. Ms. Perez-Gondola and I presented to city leadership and our elected officials, as well as several department leads, how the program would work and connect persons to care via judgment sentence orders, and ensure the nonprofit entities participated in the judicial process of persons eligible for STOP. This direct connect facilitated in closing the gap to care, improved accountability, and addressed behaviors, key components to an improved quality of life for those in need of more comprehensive navigation and safety on the transit system. Application and interpretation of our state statutes and city ordinances and the handling of judgments against our fellow citizens is not a position to be taken lightly or with favor. This should be done honorably and with the utmost trust. Trust in our appointed positions in the judicial system, whether civil or criminal, local or federal, is crucial. While working with Ms. Perez-Gondola, I witnessed her conviction to consider personal accountability of our citizens, as well as the fallibility and challenges of life. She applied these aspects in each case in her presentation to the court of fair and responsible sentencing terms as a prosecutor, which ultimately may have connected them to care for the very first time. I'm confident Ms. Perez-Gondola would render the same professional actions in her role as municipal judge. She presents the high ethical and moral requirements for a judge, and is a pleasure to work with. I thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak on her behalf.
Thank you. Connie?
Good morning. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I'm here in support of Patricia George to be the next municipal court judge. I've known Patricia since 2012 when she started the Veterans Court in City of Phoenix. I was part of that team, so I started working with her there, and also through Route 11 mental competency through the county, and then eventually through the Phoenix Behavioral Health. I'm a court liaison for Mercy Care, the regional behavioral health provider, and so, a lot of our clients are going through all these courts, and, a lot of times, when I first started in the kids' court, I saw, a lot of continuances, or, the lawyers at the court didn't know the services that could be provided. What I like about Patricia is she learned the REBA system. There's a lot of moving parts, and I think because of her knowledge, she's willing to, do the work, ask questions, and, she knows how to get an SMI evaluation, or she knows what a clinical team is. And I worked with lawyers and judges, who still don't know what the REBA is. But if you ask Patricia, that is what makes her a great prosecutor and a great advocate for not just the veterans or the homeless, but also, people who are suffering from substance abuse issues or mental health issues. Because of her support and her willingness to allow other people on the team, to educate her so that she knows, has more information that, is needed, which I think to be on the bench, I've learned, in order to be a better advocate and to search for the justice that everyone's looking for, you need the more information that you can have. She started several programs. She reached out to a couple of our providers, and her office did grants, for Teros and Laventire Impact. So she went a step above, not just the REBA providing services, but also the municipal court being able to provide those services for people who did not qualify, whether it be veterans that were only National Guard, or people that didn't have access. So again, she's a great team player. So I am in full support of Patricia George to be the next municipal judge. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Gerald.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Gerald Richard. I'm here to support two candidates. Last time I was here to support two candidates, it was Judge Nyquist and Judge Lowry, and they both were on the bench, and so I'm hoping for the same today. David Allen is one of the candidates as far as the bench is concerned here with Phoenix Municipal Court, and one of the things I can say for David is that I've known him for more than 14 years. I initially met him while I was in the Phoenix Police Department, and he was serving with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office. Later, we began to work on the renovation of the Arizona Black Bar together, and he served on the executive board there. He left the County Attorney's Office and then went on to practice on his own, where he represented criminal defendants as well as myself in a particular case dealing in a civil matter. He then later went on and went back to where he is right now, the administrative law judge with Arizona. And what we have found, and from what I hear from other attorneys, and that is he takes the time in order to talk about hypotheticals, in order to explain the process that's over there at the Arizona Department of Transportation, something you don't find a lot of judges to take the time to do. And he has also been very active as far as making sure that he's been in the community to address community issues. Frankie Jones, she has served with the Maricopa County Attorney's Office and has been a bureau chief. She's now in the Public Defender's Office representing children. And she too has done great things with regards to not only making sure that attorneys are aware, but one of the most important things is that she served on the Arizona Supreme Court's Commission on Minorities with former Presiding Judge Roxanne Songong, and continued to promote the Chris Nakamura Judicial Workshop, which encouraged minorities and women to become judges, to teach them exactly what they needed to do. She also spent time within the community as far as educating individuals about their rights. I believe these two individuals would be outstanding based on the balance that they have in order to serve our community, and especially the city of Phoenix. They're highly professional, and I ask that you give them your consideration. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gerald. With that, that's all the cards that we have. I'd like to go to item number 7. Item number 7 is going to be a very hard item for us because we had 36 people apply for the judgeships, and from those 36, it was cut down to 11, and from that 11, now we have 8 individuals that are going to face us and actually tell us why they believe they should be judges for the city of Phoenix. But going through these resumes, it's just amazing. Amazing individuals that have given their lives to serve others. So that makes our job a lot harder than anything. There's not really anybody that just jumps out. They're all great individuals, and I just want to thank you all for coming out and taking time to give your testimonies on those individuals that we've been reading about and viewing on the videos. So with that, we'll start the process. Judge, I don't know if you want to kick it off with any words or we just start the process. It's up to you. All right. Okay, Mr. Allen's first. Good morning. We'll let you settle in there.
Thank you, appreciate that.
So, Mr. Allen, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I'll go over some information that's not in my application materials, so I'm
Oh,
not
that'd be
repeating
great.
myself. I want to make sure, can you hear me okay? Okay. I'm a longtime Phoenix resident. I consider myself a family man, in expanded sense. I'm not married, don't have my own children. Raising my younger brother, about 20 years younger than me, just moved him in with me. So that takes up a good deal of my time, and it makes me call our parents very often and thank them for not killing me now that I'm raising their child. I also into animal rescue. I currently have more animals than I can count at my home, and that takes up most of my time when I'm not dealing with my little brother. And I spend the rest of my time obviously working and volunteering. It's in my application materials. I like to spend some of my time volunteering with Ignite Your Status. It's a local organization here that does HIV education and community outreach.
So, Mr. Allen, what we're going to do now is I'm going to turn to my colleagues to see if they have any questions for you.
Thank you.
Anybody has Vice Mayor?
Yeah. So if you could just tell us a little bit in your career so far, what has been the most difficult legal issue you have encountered and how did you handle it?
Okay, if I may have a moment. Having been a trial attorney, I've had difficult issues so often, it'd be difficult to pull out one. I've always been fortunate that I've worked in a very supportive environment where there are other more experienced attorneys that I could draw upon their experience. And then same as a judge, the benefit of being a judge over the trial attorney, I have the authority to say I'll take that under advisement and I can take additional time to consider that. I do that frequently when necessary. I want to make sure I issue prompt, efficient, but accurate decisions. I think the most difficult legal decision or issue I ever had to deal with came when I was a trial attorney. It was a legal and ethical issue. I'll just give you a brief background so you can understand why there were legal issues or ethical issues. I was assigned in the prosecution of a case where a gentleman had been charged with a very serious assault. As I investigated the case, I came to find out that the wrong person had been charged. Unfortunately, just circumstances, police were on scene doing something else, looked up to see this man hit someone when in fact he was defending himself and he was charged with the crime. As I looked into the case, the people that were there, they came forward, surprisingly, and confided in me that what their involvement in the crime was, but they were going to plead the fifth. So when the matter would go to trial, no one would have known what was truly going to would have happened, that we were prosecuting the innocent man. In the interim, he had lost his job, he had lost his girlfriend, he had lost his apartment because he was sitting in jail. The difficulty for me was how to present that case so the jury would hear the truth, so they could make the appropriate decision. It was also an ethical dilemma because when I sought guidance from my superiors, and I don't want to speak ill of them, I think they just dismissed me because I was a young attorney, not because there was any ethical issues on their part. They said, oh, just let the jury handle it, handle them all and let God sort them out, and I didn't think that was appropriate, and I struggled with that as a young attorney, and it shaped how I prosecute and how I handle any cases as a judge going forward. Because it helped me recognize that doing the right thing is also sometimes the most difficult thing. Because the right thing in that case was for me to dismiss the case because it was not appropriate to let that case go to jury because as it was going to be presented, the jury would have simply heard about this man hitting someone over the head, causing serious damage, and they would have issued a guilty verdict because they would not have been allowed to hear the testimony of the people that would have been able to explain that that man was defending himself, but the witnesses didn't see that information. So that was a very difficult legal decision I had to deal with in my life and my career, and it was also an ethical one that shaped how I practice as a trial attorney and later as a judge.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And another question would be, how would someone on the opposing side would describe you?
Oh, it depends on how the case is going for them at that moment. In my sense, as a judge, I guess then they would always be, in some sense, feel like they're opposing me, since I have to issue rulings on their motions and their questions. But in a traditional sense, or adversarial sense, I would think that they would say that I was fair, very relaxed. I go to work every day recognizing that what we're doing is our job, that it's not personal, that we have to keep up, we have to maintain a professional line. While it can be very personal because the issues that are raised, the emotions that are raised, as a judge, I recognize you have to keep a distance from that, valuing what's important to the people in the case, but also keeping a distance so you can issue a fair and appropriate judgment. So they would describe me as balanced, measured, I would have to say, relaxed. I try, when everyone comes into my courtroom, while I try not to be informal, I try to make everyone feel at ease, let them know that we're there to discuss certain issues. I will always narrow the issues so that they know what they're there to talk about. So I think they would call me patient and understanding, because I recognize that we're there to do a job, but we're still human beings, and sometimes people have good days and bad days, and I try to make allowances for that. So I think that's how most people would describe me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Garcia?
You're welcome.
Well, thank you.
Can you give an example of a time, excuse me, according to your values, you've pushed for or accomplished systematic change?
It would be reaching far back where I implemented change, because I try to implement or work for systemic change quite often, but whether I'm successful at it is another story. So the most recent example I can think of where I was successful, where it was have some significant impact, was years ago. While I was in school, we were not required, but was encouraged to participate in different legal clinics. And I noticed there were legal clinics to help domestic violence survivors. There was a homeless men's clinic. There was an immigration rights clinic, which I worked in. And I found that there was a clinic to serve almost every underserved community that was in our area, except the deaf legal community. And I felt that was a significant issue because of the language or communication barriers. They didn't receive the same access to legal services that were around, particularly having a law school there. There were a lot of free legal services. So I used, having studied special ed in undergrad, I used my connections there because I know that those students had to do a certain number of hours of community service. So I coordinated a program where those students could get their practicum hours by volunteering in a legal clinic that I set up, so that they could then serve the underserved community of the deaf and hard of hearing community, to connect them with the lawyers and the law students that were willing to do free legal service for them. And I think that resulted in a great change in that community, because there were hundreds of people overall, not at one given time. It was a small clinic. I don't want to make it sound more grandiose than it was. But overall, the clinic served hundreds of people that otherwise would not have had access to free legal services and social services, because everyone at that time in that particular community was focused on other communities, leaving that community underserved. And I feel like I made a difference there. And it touched on my values, because I felt that everyone deserves and is entitled to access to the legal system and the judicial system, and they were being denied that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Garcia. Councilmember Williams?
If you were appointed, how would you evaluate the current practices at the court, and what suggestions do you think you could make to improve it?
Okay. I wouldn't make any suggestions until I'd been there for some time.
You don't have to do it the first day.
Okay, that would be great. It's contrary to my personality. I wouldn't want to exercise that type of hubris to show up and say, well, you guys have done great so far, but now that I'm here, let me show you I can do better. I would never, ever do that. I would assess what programs are already in place. I would speak to the people who are already sitting and working in those programs, and finding out what's worked for them, what hasn't worked. That's how I practice in any regard. Finding out what the success, and I think there's just as much information to be found in what's not worked. From failure can come success, because you learn what's worked and not worked. I'm familiar with the city's, the courts programs, and I've found that they're very successful, so I don't know what I would have to contribute to that until I've had some time to work within them, not just as a member of the community, but then someone as a member of the bench, because then there would be different perspectives at which I would be assessing those. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm avoiding the question, but it's just, it would be contrary to my personality, and inappropriate in my part, I think, to come in and say, well, you did great for the 10 years before I got here, but now that I'm here, yeah, I would not do that. But I would look at what had worked and not worked, and then make an assessment there. After speaking, obviously, with the administration, I wouldn't want to be the rogue or the maverick that went off and just started doing things on his own, and then have someone find out what Judge Allen was doing in his court was different than all the other judges had done, possibly to an inappropriate extent. So, yeah.
Any other questions?
How do you view the judge's role in managing the court's docket, i.e. move cases efficiently and hold lawyers responsible?
Okay. I believe that the judge is a central figure in the courtroom in that respect. Is a gatekeeper, timekeeper, The way I practice in my courtroom currently, our hearing room, is I'm mindful of what the calendar docket is. I understand, and I will remind parties of how many dockets or matters that we have that day to ensure them, because I never want to tell someone, please don't mention that, or you don't have time for that. Instead, I say things like, well, counsel, or if they're self-represented, I address them by name and explain that they have, I'm sure, a lot of important points and issues they'd like to get to, but they were only scheduled for 30 minutes, and that I have other matters. So if you want to take a moment to step back, breathe, and focus on your most important issues, then I'll allow you to continue from there. So I think the judge's role is to ensure that everyone who's scheduled that day has their day in court. That's just important as getting through the calendar, but also getting through it efficiently and appropriately. I don't think it's as meaningful if a judge gets to the end of his or her docket for the day and says, well, I wrapped up all 150 cases, but only 148 of those people, of those 150, 148 didn't really get to have their issues appropriately addressed because the judge was moving so rapidly. That ties into my judicial philosophy. That no matter how routine the case is or how many times I may have seen those same issues, it is very important for those people that day. It is the most important thing most likely going on for them. So they need to be afforded that appropriate time. Fairness and access to justice also includes time. And so that also as a judge, I believe it's the judge's role to ensure that the people are treated with civility and respect in the courtroom. Otherwise, they don't have appropriate access to that forum if they're afraid of what the other side's going to say to them or how they're going to be treated, whether it's from staff or opposing counsel or even a witness that may be there today. So I think the judge's role is to ensure that everything goes smoothly so that everyone has their access to due process. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Williams. So my question would be, we have 20 judges right now that sits on our bench, and they all bring unique gifts and talents to the bench. What would be unique for yourself that would you bring to the City of Phoenix court system?
That's difficult to answer without having to taking a poll of all of them, but by our very nature, we're all unique individuals. So every person brings their own sort of diversity to any type of environment. Speaking on behalf of myself, I like to think that I'm quite a unique individual. Sometimes that may not be a good thing, depending on one's perspective. I've been told I'm a little off, but I'd rather have that than being told that I'm every day. But what I would bring to the bench is my perspective, my experience. I have sat in the city court. I sat as a commissioner for the Tempe Municipal Court. I've pro tem for the Superior Court. I've sat for 4 years now with a break as an administrative law judge, where I do essentially what amounts to evidentiary hearings on a daily basis. I'm very familiar with Title 28. That's the traffic and transportation section of our law. I also have experience as a criminal prosecutor. And I've done some brief experience as a defense attorney. So I have that unique experience. I've worked on both sides on a criminal matter. I've represented people in domestic violence situations as a prosecutor, and on the civil side, assisting people getting their restraining orders. I have also worked with victim services for domestic violence survivors. And also my work within the community, having, like I said, working with Ignite, where that takes me out to areas of the community that I otherwise wouldn't touch on. I think that a lot of people don't, where we practice a harm reduction method, where I go out and I speak with people living on the streets, engaging sex workers, engaging in intravenous drug use, high-risk users, and I engage them on a human level. And I do that fairly often, and it's become a norm for me. And I think that's a unique perspective because it allows me to see people for people and recognizing that when I'm sitting there as the judge, I'm sitting there in judgment of acts of accusations, not sitting in judgment of the people themselves. And I think that's an important distinction. So.
And any closing remarks that you'd like to give
thank
us?
you for agreeing to meet with me and speak with me. I appreciate that. I truly do. I know that you have a long day ahead of you, so I wish you folks the best in that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you. But I also want to say thank you again for this opportunity. And I've already asked for this position by submitting my written materials. So I'd like to close by asking in person, asking that you consider me for an appointment to this position. I would be honored and privileged to serve my city and my community in this expanded role that I already serve as a judge. And I look forward to that, and I thank you, and I ask that you consider me for this position.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. You folks have a good day.
You too.
Thank you.
Who's next? Patricia George. All right, Mrs. George is next. Hi, Patricia. How you doing?
Hi, very
If you
well.
take a couple minutes just to tell us a little bit about yourself and so we can get to know you.
Sure. So, one of the main things I would like you to know today is that I've really spent a lot of time with the City of Phoenix, devoting myself to bringing programs to the city and specifically to this court. With Veterans Court, you know, many of the council members know I marched that march and I brought those programs to the City of Phoenix, working with people like Chris McBride, who then became Judge McBride, and Judge Taylor at the time when he was the court administrator, and Judge Song-Ong, and really working to bring innovative, creative solutions to the City of Phoenix that change the look of the way we do criminal justice in our court. We've been going for 8 years now with that Veterans Court, and we've been able to help over 2,500 veterans successfully complete that program so they can come back and be successful members of our community. We've taken that and we moved forward, and a little over 3 years ago, we built a behavioral health court after that same model so that we could reach out to people who really needed assistance in our criminal justice system that couldn't function in a normal courtroom successfully. And so we've brought those resources in there too. I come from a really rich cultural background. You know, I grew up on the border in South Texas. I grew up in an agricultural area. My family were farmers, so I was out in the field with them, working with them. And I built myself up working through knowing in order to get an education, I had to work through grades. And I got to college on my scholarships, and it brought me to Arizona. And I came to Phoenix, and I realized I loved Phoenix, and you know you have to love Phoenix because my first time in Phoenix was in July, and I still loved it and wanted to stay here. And I really appreciated the wide variety of culture that is in Phoenix. I enjoy it, I like it, and I've committed my career to working here. One other thing I would like to say is you're going to hear a lot today about the different programs. The one thing I can tell you is that I understand, and I have worked from day one on knowing how to build structure, on how to build those programs, on how to create those programs, on how to work with the court to make sure that the systems are set up so that we can do them successfully. And we have. You know, City of Phoenix is absolutely renowned for the programs that we've brought in, and we are leaders in the country. When we did the Veterans Court, we very quickly became the largest standalone misdemeanor court in the country. So we are looked at as leaders and how to do these programs, and I've worked alongside of everybody to help build those programs. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Vice Mayor, any questions?
So in your career, thank you so much for that presentation. Thanks. In your career so far, what has been the most difficult legal issue you have encountered, and how did you deal with it?
So for me, it was absolutely the reason why I fought so hard to get a veterans court. In 2006, I had a case, and it was a very young man who was a Marine. He had a DUI. I read this case and realized something else was going on in this case. He ended up assaulting someone during this DUI stop after an accident, and he left the scene, and when the officers found him, he had absolutely zero memory of any of that occurring. He was completely cooperative, he was calm, and what we discovered is he had a PTSD blackout episode. So there were no veterans court in the country at all, nowhere. But I'm the spouse of a military veteran who spent 27 years, 2 months, and 2 weeks as a Black Hawk pilot. So as an officer's wife, I'm used to mentoring families and other members in the military that need help. And so I saw a pattern that concerned me. And when I took this to the leadership at the time, and I said, we need to look at this differently, because if we don't provide the right treatment, this young man is not going to succeed. He said, we are just going to make another statistic. And so it was specially assigned to someone. Unfortunately, the assault ended up causing an injury that became a felony. And we did what we always do. We contacted the county attorney's office and we split that assault off, and it went to the county, and they handled it the way they always do. And we didn't make sure that there was special treatment for this young man. And so I followed. You know, he got his felony. And guess what? He got another DUI, and he went to prison. And then he got out, and he got another DUI. And this time he hurt someone and put him in the hospital for 6 months. And he's in prison now. And because of that case, I absolutely devoted the rest of my career to make sure we started doing something different, because it does not protect the community to do the same thing we've always done. 2008, Judge Russell in New York created the first Veterans Court. I picked up the phone. I called him. I said, what do you do? What did you do? What are you seeing? How did you get resources into your courtroom? What can we do here? I know you do felonies. How can we do this at the misdemeanor level? And then I have various people in the community, because of being involved with the military community, I reached out to, you know, General Maxon, the head of the Department of Veteran Services, the VA. What do we need for you to give us a social worker to come work with us? And worked through those necessary barriers to find out how many veterans we had, what did the VA need for numbers so they could give us a dedicated person. And that difficult case is what made me completely change my career to focus on problem solving and restorative justice.
Thank you. And how would someone from the opposing side describe you?
Someone who is fair, very fair and equitable, someone who will listen, who can remain calm under pressure, someone who is willing to look at all sides of the situation. From day one, regardless of what I've done, the basis of the way I do things is justice. It has to be based in justice. And justice has a variety of faces, right? So it's not, I don't come to work for criminal conviction. I'm in a criminal justice system. And so you must stay focused on that. And I would say all of my opposing compatriots would say that they could come to me and they could discuss an issue, and they're going to get a very fair assessment. People will be held accountable, but they're going to be given the best opportunity to come out with a positive experience so they can come back into our communities and have the ability to be part of our community and really succeed and move forward and get past any negativity they may have faced.
Any other questions,
No.
Vice Mayor? Councilmember Carlos Garcia.
You've kind of answered this already.
That's okay.
But I'll give you a chance to expand or give another
Sure.
example. So can you give an example of a time, according to your values, that you've pushed for or accomplished systematic change?
Yes. So obviously with Veterans Court, you can tell that I'm very passionate about that, and I worked really hard to make sure we got there. But it didn't stop there. As we moved forward, what we realized is there are a huge number of barriers for veterans to get treatment. And what we discovered is not everybody's eligible for VA treatment. Even if you served honorably, even if you had no issues while you were in, you may not be eligible because of the rules for eligibility at the VA. So what that created was a situation where we had people getting treatment in our court, and they had one set of treatment if you were VA eligible, and they had another set of treatment if they weren't. And the treatment, if you weren't, was not as successful. So what I did is I looked for funding resources, and I applied for a SAMHSA grant, which is with the federal government, and we were able to get a grant for $1 million to cover 3 years that brought in a treatment provider who now provides the same course of treatment for non-VA eligible veterans as those that receive VA eligible veterans. In fact, it's so successful that the VA opened up one of their specialty treatment programs and has now trained those same therapists that we have in the same program. So it is exactly the same treatment, and the success has been fairly phenomenal. And we're applying again, this time for a 5-year, $2 million grant. So we're waiting to hear for that. Likewise, we started out with behavioral health court really as a Rule 11 court, which only dealt with competency, whether people were competent to stand trial. And working through the other courts, realized we really needed more for those that were facing mental health and behavioral health issues. And so I worked with Judge Hensey and the court again and really fought to bring those resources in and have a much more robust behavioral health court. And we do, and that court also is a leader in our country, and it just shows the innovation the City of Phoenix is willing to undertake.
Thank you, Councilmember Garcia. Councilmember Williams?
We've talked about your leadership in the veteran court and just touched on the second court. How do you plan to continue to play the role, but continue to evaluate what the court has now and make improvements?
Sure. So there's several things that I think I bring to the table that can help the court. One is the expertise in being able to help set up the programs and the connectivity to the resources in the community that I've built through working with the other programs. One of the suggestions that I've mentioned before is looking at the possibility of making a more robust domestic violence court. And with that, it's once again about setting up a courtroom and our courthouse where we can have more resources available at the time of the court. I work on all of the diversion programs that the City of Phoenix has. And one of the things I specifically made sure every contract presented and every RFP presented is that if you are asked to bring services into this courthouse, how are you going to do that? So that that provider already knows if we have an opportunity where we can bring you into the courthouse and be available here for our clients, how are you going to do that? Because we might expect you to do that. And I think what we've shown through the other courts is if you can bring those providers in, now they can meet with them right away. If there's issues, I, as a judge, would be able to know right away because that individual could come right back to me and say, this happened, I have this barrier, and then we can look at what can we do. So instead of months down the road, we have a more immediate impact. We have the ability to make sure those that need counseling and that counseling will prevent them from ever coming back, we can make sure they get into it and that they're effectively into it and that the needs are met so that they do realize they don't have to be in this courthouse and that it'll keep them from ever having to be back here and rebuild whatever that family unit was before they ended up in our court.
I have a second question. Sure. How do you view the judge's role in managing the court docket?
So I think every judge has their own personality and their mechanisms for running their court, but I believe that you have direct control. You have certain mechanisms set up throughout the whole courthouse that are going to have an impact on what load you have on your case management. But I believe you have to look at every case and you have to manage it the way that case needs to be managed. And if it requires that you see that person more often, then you need to see that person more often. And make sure that you're treating every person like a human being, that they are considered appropriately, that they come in, they know that you have control of your courtroom, but they also know that you have compassion, that you're going to be fair and equitable, that you can take some of that stress off of them when they come in. Coming into a courtroom is stressful for anybody. It would be stressful for me. And there's ways you can handle that to make it less stressful. And when you create an environment that is less stressful, even if your caseload is large, you're going to find that you can still move through that caseload fairly quickly and efficiently. And you need to pay attention to the fact that you still have to be efficient in that time frame. You have to speak to the people. If you have a heavy load, you have to tell them, I understand this is a heavy docket. I understand we are all busy and we all have jobs and we all have families, and I know you're having to wait. Please understand we are working as quickly as possible, and we respect that, and we will get to you as soon as we can. You know, those are all efforts that help keep the demeanor in the courtroom calm. It helps people leave with a more positive attitude, and you can work through the heaviest docket possible, which we did in Veterans Court and Behavioral Health Court. I mean, we had days with over 100 defendants in one day, and we managed those dockets successfully.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Williams. A couple minutes just to closing remarks.
Sure. I think it goes without saying that I believe in restorative justice. I believe that the court and the judge has a unique spot in those courtrooms, that they set the tone for the respect. They work with the parties and you create accountability, but at the same time, you're restoring faith and hope in the people involved in those courtrooms so that they can succeed when they leave. I've devoted a decade of my life to making sure the City of Phoenix is a leader in those programs, and whatever we need to do, that we do it to make sure that we continue to be a leader. Right now, we've been asked by the Supreme Court to be the leader in making sure that when other courts across the state want to start a veterans court, that we're available to help them know how to do that, that we can direct them to the right resources, that we can be the ones to say, we'll show you how to do it and we'll make sure you know how to get to the resources you know you need. And if you don't know where to start, we have a place to help you start. I think we have had so many successes. You know, the suspended license court, and you know, we started all the way back with homeless court. You know, every time we learn something new. But I think the biggest thing we learn with each one of these is that the more you can treat a person that comes into your court like a real person, the more you can acknowledge them, the easier it is to hold them accountable, and the easier it is for them to come out with a positive experience and move forward and get over this blip so that they can still be successful.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, and
thank you.
And I think we're going to go for the next person, which is Frank Jones. Good morning. How you doing?
Good morning. Good.
So a couple minutes just to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay. I was born and raised in Queens, New York. I'm the youngest of two children. My brother is about 12 years older than me. He still lives in New York City. When I was about 10 years old, my father got a job in Nebraska, so we actually moved to the Midwest. So that was a change for me, obviously growing up in Queens, and then all of a sudden we lived in Lincoln, Nebraska. And so that's where I went to junior high and high school. I later also, thank you so much, attended college there. I went to Creighton University for undergraduate and law school. So I was a political science major and a business minor there. While I was there is where I met my husband, Michael. Michael he's born and raised in Phoenix, so that's how I later moved to Phoenix, Arizona. He graduated from Alhambra High School, so I don't know if we got any Alhambra people here, but that's where he went to high school. I met him as an undergraduate. He was a chemistry major, and his goal was, he was looking at going to dental school. So what worked out nicely is when he started dental school and later I started law school. So we actually graduated the same year in 1993. So I was very excited. Our families were happy. They could cheer for us at the same time because it's an all-university graduation. And then we moved back to Phoenix. That was his goal. He always wanted to come back home. The only reason he left because there were no dental schools here at the time, so he had to go out of state. But his goal was always to come back home and practice. So we moved here in '93. I took the bar here, and then I started practicing. I do have two sons, or we have two sons. Michael Jr., he's 25 now, and he is active duty Air Force, so he's just got back from a 3-year tour over in Japan, and now so he is in South Dakota. He is not very happy because of the cold winters, and since he's a native of Phoenix, he had to learn how to drive in snow and deal with things that we don't deal with here. So that was a little more than what he had to deal with. But he's getting adjusted and settled back up there. And then our youngest son, Christopher, just graduated from NAU this past May. So once I started, after I took the bar here, I did some tax law at the Department of Revenue, and then I did immigration law for a while, and I did that for about a year, where I did deportation defense. And at the time, the firm I was with, I was over our family unit. So I was in charge of our family applications at that time. I did all the family ones because our firm was divided up into family, labor, and then the deportation. So mine specialty was family at that time. Later, I went to the county attorney's office where I actually was there for over 20 years. And during that time, I was in the regular trial groups. I handled regular felony cases, also misdemeanor cases, and at that time, and still is, the county attorney's office was always the conflict office for the city of Phoenix. So we handled a number of city cases, and even when I was in private practice, actually my first jury trial was in the city of Phoenix. My client was a solicitation for prostitution, and then my first DUI was actually in the city of Phoenix. So very familiar with the city of Phoenix. So we handled conflict cases. So over the years, we would handle the misdemeanors if they had a conflict based on family or whatever the nature of the conflict, we would handle those. So we'd be in the city of Phoenix. So I was there for a number of years. I handled our major drug cases for a while, so the larger like marijuana cases, big bail cases like that, in addition to the regular trial group and charging. And then for 12 years, I was a supervisor of our Probation Violation Bureau. And during that time, I supervised not only our regular probation violation courts, there were 2 courts, but they ran all day long, and those were high volume courts. We had 3 calendars, an 8:30 calendar, a 10:30 calendar, and a 1:30 calendar. In addition to those, because I supervised the probation bureaus, I also supervised all of our specialty courts. So I was in charge of the drug court, the DUI court, the mental health court, the domestic violence court, veterans court, and another one's called JTOP. And that's the juvenile transfer offender program. When juveniles by statute, we had to prosecute them as adults, but realizing because they were still teenagers and under 18, they really needed some additional supervision. And so that was a specialty court that we created for that. So I was in charge of those calendars as well. And supervising that bureau, I supervised not only the attorneys, but also the staff. So my job was to make sure, our attorneys were there, and I didn't just staff them. I actually attended those courts. I was a regular in those courtrooms, in our regular probation courts as well as our specialty courts. So if there were issues, I didn't have to hear from it secondhand. I was actually in there to see what was going on. And in management, I also had to attend. We had a committee member, so obviously we had the subcommittees with all the specialty courts, but I also worked on the various, our probation violation, there was a subcommittee. There's also our sentencing and probation committees there at the Superior Court. So in that capacity, I was always meeting with the probation department, the courts, the clerk of the court, the public defenders, because we always had to work together to figure out obviously how to get our calendars to work, but not only it just affecting probation, but then how it affected the court in general, because what happened in probation may affect courts in the other divisions as well. So constantly dealing with regular meetings on that. Recently, last year, I left the county attorney's office after that long, and I went to the legal defender's office. And what I'm doing now is doing dependency cases, and this is when children are in foster care. And so the legal defender's office, we represent the parents, and the goal is usually it's family reunification, and so that's it's interesting because also a lot of times I've seen, and I've seen this when I was doing criminal, is it's sometimes it's the same people. They have a criminal case, but they also have a dependency case because while they're fighting various whatever the criminal charges are, but they are also having the same issue. They're trying to get their kids back because some of those same issues have surfaced obviously in their lives, and so it's affecting different areas of their life. It's not just the crime, but it's affecting their families, and so getting to see that. So working in that capacity and trying to get families back together.
Thank you so much. Any questions, Vice Mayor?
Thank you so much for that. In your career so far, what has been the most difficult legal issue you have encountered, and how did you handle it?
I think one of the most difficult issues that I've seen is in particularly seeing a lot of our drug cases, because we've seen the number of how it affects different lives, but just over time, just the types of drugs, just in general, substance abuse. And those are always difficult to see because there are various reasons why obviously people, fall into substance abuse, but sometimes it's just seeing the consequences that fall with that, because you see the daily struggles, but we see and we get to court, one act leads to another, and so what starts out as substance abuse, well, then it ends up being, then you start to see thefts and burglaries and other things increase because of a substance abuse issue, and that's really where the root's starting. But it's how to combat that, and then you're trying to figure out what can we do about that, or what can we do to counter that. And that's one reason why I was very interested with the specialty courts, because you look at the courts can only do so much, but then you realize it's going to have to come from the community and try to build and bridge that gap, because you can't just say, well, this is what a person needs to do, but how can we fix this so the person doesn't come back into the criminal justice system? Because until you get to the root of the problem, they're going to just coming back, and then it continues to escalate. We go from probation, then after a while, the courts get tired. Then the next, we go to incarceration. Then we go from jail. Then we go to prison, and then it just becomes a life cycle. And then when people get out of prison, they get out. Now they have felony records. They can't get a job. They can't get an apartment. No one wants to hire them. Then it becomes just this life cycle where they feel like, well, now I'm trying to get clean. I'm trying to do better, but now I feel like I'm just trapped. And so how do we get past that? What do we do about that? So that's when I enjoy working with the specialty courts, because I realize it's got to from what can we do? What can we partner with so we can actually get people to get their lives changed, to make the behavioral change so they can actually change and change all aspects of their lives. Because you don't want to just see someone just get stuck, and it feels like it becomes a life cycle and a lifelong lesson, or it's something that takes them 5 and 10 years. For example, like in the cases I see on the dependencies, children don't have 5 and 10 years to wait for their parents. They're not going to wait that long. They can't wait while someone's incarcerated for them to get their lives turned back around. So we got to figure out the community, and that's what I like about with the specialty court. We work with the partners to see, okay, what type of programs are available. How do we help somebody? Because once you change the behavior, then you won't see the person back. But then you got to see what's causing that behavior. Was there something in their background that, was there a trauma? What was that? What led to it? But once you get to that and you find out what the problem is, then you can actually help them, and then a person can move on. And I found that especially in criminal, that's what I look at.
Thank you. And how would someone from the opposing side describe you?
Over the years, I worked a lot with public defenders, because that's where who was on the other side, since I did that for 20 years. A lot of them, I think they would describe me as a fair person, because I never looked at a case as a case. I looked at it, this is a person. So I always wanted to look at, I see what the crime is, but I also look at the person. If it's a victim case, I want to get the victim's input. So I look at everything, but look at being fair. I didn't look at a case to say, well, it was charged this way, so this is the way I'm going to treat it. I look at, okay, this is a case. Let me see what the law requires. Let me see what the rules are required. Let me see what the evidence is. Let me hear from the victim. Let me look at the case. But if you have something, saying, my guy, I think deserves a break. I think this program might work, or, can we look at jail time versus prison? Maybe we could do that and try to get things on the right road. I would look at that. So I would say they would look at me as a fair-minded person, someone who listens, someone that doesn't make a decision without having the full facts, making sure that everything is before me before I make a decision on something, because I think that's very important. And that's what I did for many years as a prosecutor, because prosecutors, first, I mean, we had to decide how to charge, what to charge, if to charge, turn it down, send it back to the police, or if we're charging, then what the charges are, and then what the full ramifications. But then also you look at, were there any constitutional, violations? Was there a Fourth Amendment? Was there a Fifth Amendment? Was there something else coming up? So I think that's what people would say about me, my opposing side, because I looked at everything, not just looked at some things, but looked at the whole picture.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Garcia.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you give an example of a time, according to your values, that you've pushed for or accomplished systematic change?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the rest of it.
That you've pushed for or accomplished systematic change?
I think a lot, well, when I was working in my office, when I worked still at the county attorney's office, we had a lot of policies and procedures that we had to follow. And I understood where, some of those come from. I understood a lot of it came from being fairness. You want to be fair because you want to treat everybody fair. You don't want to say you treat this person one way and you treat person another. So I understand why the policies were there. But there were times when I said, we need to look behind some of that. I would say, particularly like we had some of them even in probation, very few, but we had some policies there. And I said, we need to change on how we're looking at things when, in particular, my bureau would look at, we responded to motions for civil rights and restoration of civil rights and terminations of probation. And so I made the change within, or suggestion in my office to change how we looked at those. I said, you can't just always look at what the crime is, but look at, consider what they've done after that. And that's what I would tell my attorneys. I say, when you're reading someone's application, don't just look at what happened in the past, but look at what they've done to make the change now for the future. So when you're reading someone's application or their petition, my thing was, we'll look at the rule, but then look to see, well, what have they done differently? How have they shown a change in that? And so that's what I push for. I said, we don't want to just look at something and always reiterate when we respond to the judge, well, this was the facts, this was the crime and what they did. Yes, it's what they did, but what have they done since then? If it's been 2 years and they've been into probation, what have they done that would warrant a termination of probation at this time? You've got to look past that. Don't just look at the rule, well, we should object because based on A, B, and C. I said, no, we should look at, there's other factors you have to look at, and there are going to be some exceptions that you have to consider.
Thank you, Councilmember Garcia. Councilmember Williams.
As time goes by, if you're appointed, how will you evaluate the efficiency of the court processes and determine what changes could be made to improve the court system?
Well, one thing I think we always look at, obviously we look at the numbers. Whenever we look at something, you always say, okay, I know we look for crime statistics, for example. You look to see, well, where are we making changes, if things are going up or down, in a certain direction. So for me, I look at, the types of crime. For example, they always get categorized, like they'll say, oh, DUIs are down. And you'll say, okay, maybe that's, due to enforcement or due to some other things. Or domestic violence is up or down, whichever way it's going. But I think it's also, you have to look at what the resolutions are. One, what do people say when they come before the court? Are they seeing that they actually felt like they were treated fairly? Do they feel like they were a part of the process, that they weren't just a number that came through for the case, but they were heard, whether it was the victim, whether it was the defendant, or whoever the party was in the case, that they were heard fairly. And I think that's one thing, that's one measure. On others is also just to see, so when numbers go down, you say, well, perhaps it's the community involvement, because I think there's more to the kind of like carrot and the stick. There's some things we can do. Yes, there's always going to be punishment if there's something wrong. Of course, that's where the courts will come in. But you also have to look at, well, what can we do to prevent things? There's some community things or have messages out there. How can we reduce crime or reduce things? And one example that I'll give is, particularly in DUI cases, I've noticed we've seen an increase in drugs, and they now like a drug DUI versus an alcohol DUI. And when I was reading through the statute, if you look at some of the drugs that are included in there, they're not just your typical pain medications. I mean, if you look in there, some of the the drugs that are listed, they're antidepressants, and there's just a wide number that I think a lot of people wouldn't even realize that could be something that could be subject to a DUI. So to me, it's like you get on the front end of it and do some, community service and outreach to people to start to say, these are some things you should be aware of, because we've done really good, for example, with the DUIs. People know about alcohol, but there's other things perhaps they never thought of. I never thought about. There's a lot of like I said, antidepressants. There's a wide range of medications that are, they're prescription medications. And if you look in the statute, they would actually be, if you're driving, a person could be guilty of it, and they would never know that. So I think somebody get on the front end is one way to measure. Well, your cases go down, but then you've given some educations, and so people realize that's probably I didn't know that, maybe I should be aware, I won't do that, and therefore you'll see decreases that way.
And how do you view the judge's role in managing the court's docket?
The judge plays a very important, because the judge controls the calendar, but the judge also needs help from everyone else as far as to make it run efficiently. And I say that, and I say in regards when I think about running the probation calendars. If the attorneys, everybody needs to get there on time. You need to work together, because if you get there late, people aren't prepared. The judge can be ready to go, but if people aren't ready to go, your calendar's not going to move. So that was one thing I would tell my attorneys: make sure you're prepared. Have your files ready, have your cases ready, because that helps everything run efficient. The judges be ready to go. We want to be ready to go. We don't want to hold anything up. So I view the judge is the one to move the calendar along, because obviously the judge controls the flow. They call the cases, and the judge is listening to everybody, because obviously you got to listen to everybody before you make a decision. So that takes time, but you also have to balance that out. You've got to balance. Okay, if I've got a heavy calendar, it's got to move, because otherwise, say I think back to like our 8:30 calendar. Well, the 10:30 calendar is coming up right behind it. So the judge has to control the flow. And then sometimes, you'll ask, counsel, if this is going to be something difficult. Do you need more time? Do we need to reset it to give you more time? Because I don't want to cut anybody off, but you do want to make sure that things do flow efficiently, because on high volume calendars, you do have to get those done in a timely fashion. People are waiting, and a lot of times, like for example, 8:30 calendars run. If they're still there at 10:30 and you haven't called their matter, people are getting anxious. They're wondering if you're going to get to them and things like that. So it's very important for the judge to keep it going.
Thank you, Councilmember Williams. So right now we have about 20 judges on the bench in the courts in Phoenix. What's unique? What would be unique that you'd bring to the court bench?
One thing I look at is just obviously the work that I've done. I worked, as a prosecutor, and so obviously the types of cases dealing with criminal matters, and I've dealt with felonies and misdemeanors. Dealing with felonies, when I think back in handling felony cases, there are a lot of times, especially in particular like DV or DUI cases, I would say I really wish we could have done something before this got to a felony level, because a lot of things could be taken care of when it's a smaller, at a misdemeanor, or it could be handled differently. It could be handled more positively, because sometimes by the time it got to a felony level, there wasn't by then it's very serious. If there's been someone seriously injured or something like that, then it's not going to be a favorable outcome from the defendant. It's going to be a hardship for everybody, because not everybody's going to be unhappy. For example, if it's been a death or a serious injury, it's not too, I won't say it's too late, but it's already at a serious level, and you're probably looking at a lot of lives have been changed. A lot of heartache, and so I look at that as if seeing that on the front end. I said I wish there would be more done. That's why I always enjoyed when I could work with misdemeanor cases, because I felt if I could make a change here, then maybe something won't escalate to something more serious later. If you can handle it at that level, it's a lot easier. I could handle an assault a lot easier than I could an aggravated assault, or where someone is stabbed or shot. I could deal a lot better when we can make a behavioral change on how to, anger management and control your temper, versus now it's escalated to something else and someone is seriously injured or, might have even been killed. So I think that's one thing that I could bring, because I know what lies ahead, what can happen if we don't, take some measures now or try to help people now, where it can end up. Other things would I be working in management, because when I worked as a bureau chief for those years, and I also later was a justice court bureau chief, I learned how to manage. And so, and not just managing my attorneys, but I mean, I managed the staff. I had to deal with budgets. I had to deal with disciplinary matters. I had to deal with when my office says, you know, the county's doing, we've got some budget cuts, and one of them was coming to my bureau. I got my bureau, you know, was cut in half. I still had to figure out, okay, they'll take some cases, but I had to figure out how to manage covering the remainder of the calendars with, you know, with fewer people. And we were able to do that, and that was a high volume calendar. My bureau was one of the smallest bureaus in the office. I went from 11 attorneys one time down to 6, and we still handled 15,000 cases in a year. So I had to learn how to manage that, and I couldn't ask the other bureaus to come help me. They had their own bureaus there. You know, everybody was managing in trials. So I learned how to do that and learned how to deal with the staff and keep, you know, the morale up with everyone. When we went through budget cuts at the county, we weren't getting raises, learning how to deal with that, to come in with a smile every day and say we have a job to do, but encouraging everybody to go forward. A lot of the other things that I've done, on the committees that I've served, there's 2 that I'm very excited about as I work on the Commission on Minorities and the Judiciary. That's a commission that I've been on for about the past 6 or 7 years now, and now I chair it. But that is where that commission, we seek to look at, you know, diversity on the bench, and not just the judges, but also the staff. But also we do a lot of community outreach, and this year I'm excited that this is going to be our 3rd year. It's called Legal Futures, where we have college students, but also we have high school students coming down next month, and they're going to get to interact with the judges. And this is going to be judges from all the benches. They're from the municipal court, Superior Court, Court of Appeals, and the Supreme Court, and we're very excited where they get to spend a day, and we do it kind of as a round robin, but they'll get to sit down with the judges, and they can ask them questions. Well, how did you become a judge? What made you want to become a judge? And a lot of these are from our high school students that are in the ASU pipeline program. These are some of our moot court students. So it's things like that, because I'm very dedicated to it's always making things better, and so I want to distinguish that. And so I want to bring that to the bench, because what I do there on the committees that I served and how I handle those, I want to bring that to the bench, because I think when you make the bench better. I look at community the involvement, like I said, the commission, I'm going to how we do the community outreach, is because I like to make things better, and so I think that will be a great asset. And on that commission as well as one of the conferences that I get to attend, and I do get to represent the state and talk about what we've been doing as a state and judiciary. And one of the things we highlighted last year at the conference was we talked about the CAP program here at the City of Phoenix, and how we've been working to get the fines reduced. And so those are things that I enjoy to do, to share and then bring those back when I come back from the conference.
And any closing remarks?
Well, first of all, I do want to thank all of you for having me today. I don't take that lightly to be invited here. I take that as an honor and a privilege. So I thank all of you for taking your time. I know you interviewed, you've seen my application, you've seen what I do. And I know there's a number of qualified applicants. I just want to say that, you know, you look at my application, a lot of things I do, I don't do that because it's just something to do. I don't join like the committees I've served on. I don't do that because I just want to serve on that. I have a heart for the people. One thing that and you've noticed a lot of times, my real passion, excuse me, is dealing with a lot with the youth. If you notice, that's where I'm excited about the legal futures, moot courts and things like that. I'm very excited because that's something that I truly enjoy. That's one of the things that I do at my church. Is I'm the choir director for our youth choir, so I'm very active. And the children that I work in our Sunday school class and then in my choir, they're from 5 to 11. So I've always had a passion for dealing with youth. And I started at home with my own children. They're 25 and 23 now, but I've always taught them because I've been. And my husband as well. I mean, we're very active parents, but we firmly believe you need to live by an example. So I can't tell my sons to do something that I wouldn't do. I can't be something that expect them to do it. I'm different at home. So I've always told them the same person they know that I'm mom at home. I'm the same mom when things didn't go right, if they had to get disciplined, the same mom who cheered them on at their basketball games, and I cheer them out like all my nieces and nephews cheering them on at their games, the same person. So I'm the same person whether I'm working on a committee, where I'm teaching at the State Bar Convention, whether I'm working, whether I'm doing a trial, I'm the same person. And I think that's very important because it's not, you shouldn't be a different person, you'd always be the same, it's the character that comes through. And that's what I've been in my personal life and in my professional life. It's the character, and I have that same integrity. I have that same passion with, at home, at family, with my church, on my job, and I will bring that same enthusiasm to the bench because I wanted to be, when I was at the office, at the county attorney's office, and where I'm at now, I always strive to be one of the best attorneys with integrity and impeccable character. I brought that as an attorney. I will bring that to the bench because I think that's very important. So what you see in my everyday life is something that you would see from me on the bench.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think we're going to be going to the next. Okay. Mrs. Mendez.
This seat right here?
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, good morning and welcome, and you'll take a few minutes just to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Good morning, Chairman, Vice Mayor, council members. My name is Mina Mendez. I was born in Phoenix. I was raised in Mexico City and Phoenix. I went to law school at the University of Arizona. Don't hold that against me. I met my husband there. We have 2 daughters. They were born in the same hospital, Good Samaritan, where I was born. And I served as a commissioner on the Superior Court for almost 10 years. It was a job that I loved. I loved the interaction with the public. I loved the feeling that when I went home at night, I felt like I had done something good for my community. And I had to leave that job that I loved because my oldest daughter at age 11 was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And my mom was also type 1 diabetic, and she had passed away 2 years prior to our daughter getting that diagnosis. So it was a very scary time for us as parents. I was the one more equipped to manage her diabetes because I had grown up with a mother who had the same disease. So I retired early from the Superior Court. And I'm happy to say that now Ava is 17 and she's incredibly self-sufficient, and they have technology now that you wouldn't believe, where you can check your blood sugar by looking at the telephone. And she's doing very well. And I spent the majority of my professional career in public service and ready to do that work that I'm so passionate about again.
Thank you so much for those comments, and Vice Mayor.
Yes. First question. In your career so far, what has been the most difficult legal issue you have encountered, and how did you handle it?
The most difficult legal issue that I've encountered, and I would say that my former colleagues on the Superior Court agreed that they had never come across a case this difficult, was a do not resuscitate order being requested by a hospital for a 6-month-old baby because the baby's parents were, their religious beliefs did not permit them to give the consent to the doctor to allow the baby to pass. And the baby's prognosis was, there was no way the baby was going to make it. And every time the doctor had to resuscitate the baby, it was causing the baby significant pain. So the doctor filed, and it's a very rare case. It's the only one I recall anyone at the court ever having. So the doctor filed a request to not have to continue to cause this baby significant pain when ultimately it was not going to save the baby's life. And he testified and told me that he believed that the parents wanted to let the baby go, but they just were not emotionally able to do it. So he met all of the statutory criteria, and I issued the order, but it was also against my personal beliefs. So it was a tremendously difficult case to do, but ultimately it was the right decision. But I felt terrible for those parents and the doctor as well. I mean, he started crying during his testimony. It was a very emotionally difficult decision to make.
Thank you. Next question. How would someone from the opposing side describe you?
I think they would describe me as thorough and organized, but also compassionate and willing to listen. I would say that those are the attributes that an opposing counsel, for example, would attribute to me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Garcia.
Hello.
Hello.
Can you give an example of a time, according to your values, you've pushed for or accomplished systematic change?
There was a law that was passed in 2010 by the Arizona legislature that, I believe it was 2010, I might have the year wrong, that prohibited persons who did not have a driver's license to seek state services. You're probably familiar with that law. And it was in conflict with the federal law governing orders of protection and who may seek an order of protection when they are a victim of domestic violence. And the federal law prohibits any person who's a victim from being denied the ability to seek an order of protection based on their immigration status or an inability to obtain state ID. I was in family court at the time at the Northeast Regional Court facility, and a woman came in who was a victim of domestic violence and had visible injuries. I believe she had a broken arm, and her ocular bone, which is this bone right here, had been broken. And she filled out the paperwork and the petition to ask the court for an order of protection, but she was denied her request to file it because she could not show ID and she didn't have a driver's license with her. And that was a mistake. The clerk of the court should not have denied her request to submit that paperwork to get an order of protection because the federal law would obviously trump that state law. So they had just made a mistake. And fortunately, this woman walked down the hall and she saw my name on the door. So we used to rotate who the judge was who was on duty for orders of protection. And I was not on duty that day. But because she saw a Latina name, she rang my judicial assistant's bell. There's a little doorbell. And she asked if we would help her. And we said, of course we'll help you. So first I had to order the clerk of the court to accept her filing. And then I did her hearing. We made sure that she had all of the information about how to go to a shelter and take care of herself and put a safety plan in place. But I later talked to the presiding judge, and I told them not only is that not correct, the federal law trumps state law, but we should never be denying a victim of domestic violence protection based on immigration status or any other reason. And my presiding judge, went to bat, and we contacted the clerk of the court, and we notified them, and they stopped doing that.
Thank you, Councilmember Garcia. Councilmember Williams.
Thank you. After you've been there for a while, if appointed, how or will you evaluate the court, the efficiencies, the processes, and determine what changes can be made to improve it?
Well, I know that Phoenix has a reputation for having a very innovative court. Before I had even made the decision or thought about applying, I had heard from community members. I'm very active in my community, and I'd heard about how valuable the CAP program has been for them to be able to pay down their fines and regain their driver's licenses. So I think programs like that are invaluable. When I was on the Superior Court, I developed the first generation of family court frequently asked questions so that self-represented litigants would have information and feel less apprehensive about coming into court. I think using technology that way, that in a way that increases access to justice, those are things that are always valuable, and I would look for ways to help Judge Taylor with improving the functionality of the court. But you know, from where I see it, they do a really great job. You know, I think it's always good to look at what you could be doing differently. The other thing that I would do in the Superior Court, we rotate to different assignments every 2 or 3 years. And every time I would rotate, I would look at our self-help center forms to see if there were ways that we could improve, or if, you know, the law changes sometimes and you might have outdated forms. But that's one way to always be looking on how to improve your customer service, is to look at the forms available for self-represented parties. That's something that I would do.
Okay. And how do you view the judge's role in managing the court's docket?
Well, I think the judge's role is to, first and foremost, to fairly and consistently and faithfully apply the law to each case before them in a manner that will instill confidence in the public who appear before us, and in a way that is predictable, so that they know what to expect when they come into a courtroom. So keeping all of that in mind, that is first and foremost the judge's obligation, you also have to be efficient. Not just so that you keep the court's docket moving, but also so that you're not wasting the time of our customers, people who need to get back to their jobs, need to be able to put food on the table. You don't want to have people waiting a long period of time to have their matter heard. So I would work to be as efficient as possible, and I have significant experience handling calendars that are very similar to city court calendars, where, you know, I think my record was 162 hearings in one day when the judge next door was sick and they couldn't find a pro tem. So I just told them I'll do that calendar as well. And you don't want to do that every day, but we were able to get through it. We worked through the lunch hour. The next day I threw a pizza party for my staff because they were impacted the most. It wasn't me who was impacted, it was my staff that was very impacted by that. So I had a pizza party for them the next day, but we were really proud of ourselves at the end of the day that no one had come to court and waited for 2 hours and then had to have their hearing rescheduled and come back another day. That's very inconvenient for people, and you can't be doing that to your customers.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Williams. Currently, we have about 20 judges that sit on the Phoenix Municipal Bench. What's unique or different that you would bring to our bench?
Well, I think the totality of my experience. I've served as a judicial officer before. It's a job that I love. I have extensive experience handling very high volume calendars. I'm very comfortable in a courtroom. I think I'm a relatable person. I think litigants feel comfortable talking to me and feel comfortable being in court with me. I think that a judge has a community responsibility both on the bench and off the bench. So in addition to my work when I was a judicial officer, I've also in my free time been the coordinator for the Latina Mentoring Project, which is a statewide mentoring program for Latinas who want to be lawyers. And we connect them to Latina lawyers and judges in the community to serve as mentors for them. We hold a couple of events each year that are formal events. We now have a Tucson event. Our first event in Tucson was this past August, and that's now going to become an annual event. And I think being visible like that in the community and being an active part of your community is also important for a judge, because it inspires confidence in the public, and judges have a duty, I think, to be community leaders. It's not a 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 job. It's a 24-hour-a-day job. I think that aspect of it is equally important.
Thank you. And is there any closing remarks that you'd like to say?
I just wanted to thank you all, first of all, for having me here today and taking the time to interview me. This is a dream of mine to serve as a judge. I have a close connection to the city. I've always felt closely connected to Phoenix. This is the city I was born in, the city that I was raised in part-time. I was also raised in Mexico City. I went to Madison Meadows for grade school, went to Xavier for 2 years of high school, and then my family moved to Tucson, where I completed high school, college, and law school, and then moved back here to practice law. So I'm very passionate about the city and how much it's growing, all of the renovation that's been done downtown. It's such a beautiful city, and I would love to be a part of working for the community that we all serve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
At this moment, I think we'll take a little 5-minute recess.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Well, welcome back to the Public Safety Justice Subcommittee. We have with us Alex Navidad, our next candidate that's going to be interviewed. So welcome, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I'm a private practitioner here in Phoenix, Arizona, now for about 25 years. I started out as a Maricopa County public defender, then I was a federal defender for a couple of years, and then I started my private practice that's focused primarily on criminal work. And about 10 years ago, I also started focusing on immigration work, mostly defense and also family petitions. That's actually been, that was a really exciting sort of addition to my practice. Other than that, I've also, since about 2004, have been teaching probably from Colombia all the way up to Mexico, just about every country. I've been teaching rule of law classes or trial skills, as Latin America has sort of made this big change into a trial system that looks a lot like ours, from one that was primarily just written and accusatory. And that's been really exciting work. We've been able to share the skill set of trials with folks all over Latin America, and it's all done in Spanish, so that's been very exciting. Other than that, I've been, community-wise, I've been involved with Los Abogados, which is a Hispanic bar association, and about 5 years now, we split into two organizations. Now we have a 501c3, which is essentially a fundraising organization, and the goal has been to raise money for other students that are coming up in the pipeline, and those funds provide everything from LSAT preparation to actual scholarships to U of A, ASU, Phoenix Law when it was here, and sort of in an effort to help people come up that don't have the money because school has gotten so expensive. Other than that, I'm married. I have a beautiful daughter who's actually here today, 3 stepchildren, and we have a crazy household, 4 children, grandma, dogs, and on my time off, I try to do as much as I can in my community, and I'm strangely also enough an ice hockey player. I do that a couple of times a week. So not a lot of Salvadoran kids do that. I used to claim I was the best Salvadoran hockey player in the world because I think I was the only one. So that's me in a nutshell.
So any question for my colleagues? Vice Mayor?
Thank you so much for that introduction. In your career so far, what has been the most difficult legal issue you have encountered, and how did you handle it?
I think the hardest legal issue was not an actual technical issue, but it was a time where I was defending a young man in Safford, believe it or not, in court in Safford, and I had found what I thought was expert evidence that he was innocent. And I shared it with him, and I said, look, I found it. This is great. Here's what we needed. Trial was a few months away, and he had been in custody already. And he said, well, I just want to plead guilty, though, because I don't want to be here any longer. And he also said, I don't really have money to pay you for the trial. And I thought, oh, no, we can't do that. So I said, look, don't worry about the trial. I'll throw in the trial. You have to do this. And he said, no, I think that, if they offer me probation or release now, I'll just plead because I just want to leave. I'm tired of being here. And I was in a real quandary. I thought, gosh, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I approached the judge and I approached the prosecutor, and we met. And I said, look, this is what I found, and I think this is, sort of the smoking gun of the defense for us. This is really very important. And they didn't really seem to have as much trouble with it as I did. The judge said, well, if he wants to plead, let him plead. And the prosecutor said, well, I think I might still be able to prove it, despite your evidence. And so that was a really, really difficult thing for me to do. I couldn't withdraw from the case because that would just take longer for him. So in the end, he ended up pleading to this, and it really tugged at my heartstrings. It tugged at my professional strings, and I think was the most difficult thing of all the things that I've done is to see this young man plea because he just wanted to go. I think that was the most difficult thing for me to ever take. And to this day, I still think about him and wonder where he is, and wondered if he made the right decision or not. So,
Thank you. Also, how would someone from the opposing side describe you?
I think most people that have had cases with me would say that I'm a true professional, that this is a calling for me. This was never a job. It was never about money or prestige. It's a true calling. I think we call ourselves true believers, that we truly believe in the system, and that we can really help people. Anybody that knows me will tell you he's a true believer. He believes in the system. They would also tell you that I'm a pretty collaborative person. I mean, I try to, and this is different than things are now, because in many places, defense lawyers and prosecutors don't even talk to each other anymore. And I try to make the effort to try to bridge that and really sit down with somebody and talk about the case and what's best in a case for everybody. And lastly, I think they would tell you if you go to trial with him, he's a pretty tenacious lawyer. He's pretty serious. I take a lot of pride in trials, spent a lot of nights and a lot of weekends. You never think you can do enough. That's probably what they would tell you, is those three things.
Thank you.
Councilmember Garcia.
I really want to ask you about hockey, but I'll leave that for another time. Can you give an example of a time that, according to your values, you pushed for or accomplished systematic change?
Back in 2005 or so, I was part of the Criminal Justice Committee. I'm not sure if I was chair at the time or not, but one of the big pushes at that time for me and a couple of people from Tucson were to create an immigration advisory for defendants. At that time, it didn't exist, and we started to see what terrible consequences people would suffer, and they weren't being advised by anybody that even when you pled to a misdemeanor or you did diversion or you did things, that this would have a pretty terrible effect down the road when you got to immigration court. And so that committee was part of the birth of that rule that eventually the Supreme Court would say, would give that advisement. And we had, interestingly enough, resistance mostly from the defense bar. The judges were sort of on board, and the prosecutors thought, this is probably a good idea. And the defense bar didn't want to do it. And so we had to convince our defense bar and say, look, this is something I know nobody wants to learn immigration law because it's very difficult to learn, but we need to. And we need to go down that road. Eventually, we would have a Supreme Court decision that would tell everyone, you have to advise on this. But before that, Arizona was kind of ahead of that time and said, we're going to pass a rule, and at the very least, we're going to tell people, look for an attorney, look for an answer, because this could have dire effects in your future. And so I thought that was something really great that we were able to accomplish. I mean, it wasn't just me, it was a group of us, but eventually that got through, and I was very proud of that. And I was very proud of the Supreme Court as well to say that, defense lawyers, you need to do this. It's part of your job, even if it takes having to learn something else. So.
Thank you, Councilmember Garcia. Councilmember Williams?
If you're appointed, how, and after a time, will you evaluate the efficiency of our court's processes and determine changes that could help to improve it?
It's, I remember having a question like this previously. I don't know exactly how these metrics would come about, but I know that talking to your colleagues is a very important thing, to see how they run their courts and to see if someone is doing it more efficiently than others. I know one of the things we always have to deal with is this whole issue with interpreters. It's tough to get cases done sometimes because the interpreter is running from one place to another, and so I think that if judges and the other interested parties get together and talk about metrics and say, look, we could run things a little bit better if we had maybe a dedicated Spanish court, or like we do with other things like Veterans Court and those things, we might be more efficient and we might be able to run things a little bit better. Domestic violence, I think, is one of those areas also where I think we could do a lot better. A lot of cases that come through get dismissed because the victim or the witnesses fail to come. And, for a defense lawyer, that's a win, but really for everyone else involved, it's really not, because the offender doesn't learn anything, the victim doesn't really get more protection, and so there's a bunch of cases that just kind of sift through. And I think if we offered some programs, if we offered a different way so that these folks could sort of cut them off at that pass before these cases become worse, that would be a really great thing. I know that DV cases, they start out as misdemeanors, but those of us that practice, Superior Court, Federal Court, we see the results and we see the product in homicide cases and aggravated assault cases later. And so I think that we need to do better at that in some way. I would hope to create some sort of metric or to be part of something where we could, maybe fix some of that.
And how do you view the judge's role in managing the court's docket?
The docket itself, well, the leadership comes from the top. But certainly, I think that it's important for the judges to be aware, of who's there. One of the things that I thought was always strange is that, we would set 20 matters at 8:30, and there's no way you can do 20 matters at 8:30. I've always thought a better way to do it might be to stagger them, or to ask the lawyers if you have plea agreements or sentencings that are ready to go in disposition, to set them at certain times so that everyone comes in and does that. So I think judges can have a big effect on their docket. I think you have to work with your staff. Your staff is really important. They have so much insight into the goings and ons and what the attorneys are saying, what the parties are saying. So I think it would be good to work with staff to see what suggestions they might have to run things a little smoother. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Williams. Currently, we have about 20 judges on the bench right now. What uniqueness would you bring to our bench?
Well, I think my uniqueness really is in my life experience and also in my professional experience. Heard a little bit about, that I came here, that I'm an immigrant. A lot of people can boast that they say, well, my parents were immigrants or were first generation. Our family, we lived it. And, I came here when I was 9. My mom was a single parent. And there's a certain richness that comes from that experience. There's a certain work ethic that you have to learn to be able to make it. And I think most importantly, there's a certain empathy that you learn from, and humility that you learn from having lived that. It's things weren't given to you. You really had to earn them, and you really have to appreciate them. And so when you get to a place, even as a lawyer, you see that that's such a privilege. Being a judge even more so, I think. But you keep that with you. I don't know that many people can say, look, I understand what it's like to go through immigration process, or I understand what it's like to leave your homeland and to try to make it somewhere else. There's a uniqueness to that, and I would hope that would bring a unique perspective to the court. The other, I think, is a very unique professional experience. It's a little different, I think, than most people because in private practice, I've had the opportunity to do so much. I've been really blessed in having cases in so many different courts, probably just about every county in the state. And it's really great to go to Stafford or to go to Prescott or to go to Yuma or Page to try cases in Indian Land. All of those things are very rich. I think there's a value, sure, in being in one place for a long time, but having seen so much it also brings you a lot of value. It's kind of like having traveled. And the other thing is, I think my skill set in Spanish is probably something you don't get every day. From the beginning, because I spoke Spanish, they would give me all the Spanish cases at the county. At the feds, it would be the same thing. And then as a private practitioner, that was a bit of a niche as well. So I think I have an understanding for that population much more than a lot of people. It's not just the Spanish, but the cultural differences that you might have. For example, sometimes we judge credibility and we say, well, if people don't look you in the eye, they're probably lying to you. But if you know about certain cultures, like people from Guatemala and some of the people that come from these places, they don't look at you in the eyes because that's just culturally not what you do. It's actually disrespectful. And so you get an insight of what people are like, in different places, I think, by serving that population. And that's the population that I've served over 25 years. And I think it's a very unique skill set to have, and I would hope that that would add something to this court.
And any closing remarks?
Well, sure. A lawyer that doesn't want to do closing remarks, I think, would be out of this world, right? I'll tell you, because nobody asked, why this job. Throughout my practice as a lawyer, when I started, like I said, this was never a money-making thing for me. It's a real calling. I think the good lawyers and good judges do this in the hopes that they can help people, that they can make their community better. It's the reason I've applied in Phoenix. I don't think that I would apply anywhere else. I feel like this is my community. I've been part of this city for a long time. All the candidates that applied here, I've seen them in one way or the other. And I feel like I'm vested in this community, and I would hope to bring my unique skill set and life experience to try to make the court better. I think like I said, it would be a privilege to do it. I feel like I'm already fairly privileged, especially for, immigrant kid from El Salvador, but that this would be even more so, and I would love the chance to do it. And I thank all of you for giving me the chance to be here. I'm excited and also very humbled to be here in front of all of you. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much. Who's next? Okay, Barbara.
Morning.
Good morning. How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Doing great. So if you'd like to take a couple minutes just to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thank you very much for having me here today. My name is Barbara Parascandola. I also go by BB. I love the city of Phoenix. I was born and raised in the city of Phoenix. I've chosen to live my entire life in the city of Phoenix and raise my 2 children in the city of Phoenix. My husband is also a native to Phoenix. We've lived our 21 years of married life specifically in Council District Number 1. Right, okay, thank you. Thank you for that. I have 2 children. My daughter is 18 years old. She will be going off to college in the fall. I went to Arizona State University, both for undergrad and law school. So she's trying to decide between ASU and that other university down in Tucson. But so her decision hasn't been made. But my son is going to be a junior in high school in the fall. He just got his driver's license, so that's liberating and also a little bit terrifying. But moreover, the City of Phoenix Municipal Court has been my work home for the past 25 years. I've been a working mom during 18 of those years, a full-time working mom. I've worked for the prosecutor's office of the City of Phoenix for 25 years. During that time, I've done everything there is to do in the office. I have handled all the different types of cases that there are in the Phoenix Municipal Court system. I am intimately familiar with the issues surrounding them, what goes on with those cases. I've been in every bureau of the office, of my office as well. That's from charging to appeals. I've been in the domestic violence and community prosecution bureaus. Currently, I do jail court, which is on weekends. In a nutshell, a little bit about myself and what's important to me are faith, family, friends, and fitness. During my 25-year legal career, I have spent the entire time helping people to try to achieve justice, and achieving that justice is what I want to continue to do, only taking it to the fair and impartial branch of the judiciary.
Thank you so much. Vice Mayor, you have any questions?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for that. In your career so far, what has been the most difficult legal issue you have encountered, and how did you handle it?
The most difficult legal issues have been ones where I know that I need to figure out the legal issue because it's something that's going to impact the community. I need to help the community. Specifically, I spent 7 years in the Community Prosecution Bureau. And I've dealt with very big cases with a lot of charges because the community can be affected with especially properties that come out of compliance. There was a situation with, it was out of my precinct, but there was a situation with an asphalt plant being operated illegally in South Phoenix. The company, there was litigation that started civilly in the environmental court. Then we went to criminal charges, almost 500. It was clear that this company wasn't going to stop operating that asphalt plant. It was operating illegally because they didn't have the proper permit to run that plant in a residential zone. It was just a cost of doing business for them. So a very difficult issue was I had to brainstorm with partners and bosses in the office as well, but what do we do to make them stop? I looked into a particular issue about could we make it where the principals of the company needed to wake up and know that there were consequences. Did research about can they be held liable? Is this something active they're doing, or is it more like a blighted property that's dilapidated and something just isn't being done? So in that research, I realized, yes, operating that asphalt plant illegally obviously is an active, it's an act of commission, not omission. It's active that they're doing it. So that was a very rewarding issue that I got to research. It was difficult. It took a lot of time. It took a lot of careful thought, but ultimately I drafted the letter to the principals telling them they could be held liable, and it was effective and it worked like a charm. And they immediately got on the phone and they said, we're gonna stop. And then moreover, we progressed and did a big settlement agreement where then they took down those silos as well, because that was a part of the community needing to be free of that. It was a health problem to the people. They were elderly, they couldn't move. So they stopped, no more asphalt plant being run, and then they took down the silos. That was a difficult issue because it was very, very important to the community and it needed to be stopped, but it was rewarding as well.
Thank you. How would someone from the opposing side describe you?
Someone from the opposing side would describe me as fair. It's my reputation. I have 25 years and my reputation precedes me, my character precedes me. What they would say is, yes, we may be on opposite sides, we litigate against each other, but they would say that I'm always willing to listen to them. I listen to them. I need to, because I need to understand the issues to come up with what's a fair resolution to all cases. We need to be, I'm very professional to them. I treat everyone with dignity, respect, reasonableness. I'm equitable, and I listen. So I do think that I know that the opposing side, I have a good reputation on both sides of the bar and bench. They would say, I am dignified to people, I'm respectful to people, and I do very much listen to the issues.
Councilmember Garcia.
Hello. So can you give an example of a time, according to your values, you've pushed for or accomplished systematic change?
So I'm thinking of a time where it was a change in me and my progression of where I was at in the office. I started out in trial bureau, and I wasn't a new litigator, but I hadn't been at the office a really long amount of time. And in a trial, I realized that there are witnesses who sometimes don't have an agenda. They let their personal feelings get in the way. They may not like defense counsel, the parties, the issues, the defendant, something. And this was a very seasoned defense attorney and high-paid private attorney, and this police officer had a cold on the day of trial, but he was acting very resistant to being open and honest with the truth. It seemed to me, and it even seemed to defense counsel, because defense counsel said something to him. Are you feeling okay? The officer just said, I just have a cold. I had gotten enough experience where I thought, I'm seeing something here, and I think you are being obstinate. You're being difficult. So I took it upon myself to tell that to him and say, you need to be a professional witness, and it doesn't matter what happens in the outcome. It's about the truth-finding process. And I'm not sure if you're hurting the state or the defense. I don't really care. I'm not sure how this is coming across, but you need to be forthcoming and just state the facts. No matter what your feelings are, who the parties are. And it was a little bit of a gamble, because I thought he could tell me I'm insulted, I don't feel well. But he said, you're right. I actually am using it as somewhat of an excuse. What change that instituted is I went back and told my peers that I thought what we need to do is be very proactive about upfront making sure that it's not just something that we see happening. We need to tell witnesses ahead of time, go into this and just tell the truth. That's the most important thing, just fully and fairly tell the truth.
Thank you, Councilmember Garcia. Councilmember Williams?
How would you evaluate the efficiency of the court's processes and determine any changes that you think could be made to improve the court?
How I would evaluate whether there was anything for efficiency, I've spent my whole time in the 25 years working in the court, working for my office, being able to assess through what works, what doesn't, having that experience, you can see what's working here and is it not something that is done here? Could we bring that to the next phase or program of something? I would always be open, talk to colleagues, gather information. I would discuss issues. I would think about ideas. I've seen the municipal court through the past 25 years, and it's made tremendous strides. We all know how wonderful it is with the helping programs, all the things that they have. I've thought to myself, for one thing, the court does a fabulous job of trying to get the word out to the public, so the public knows what the court is about, what its function is, as well as what it has as far as resources for the public. I think that there are always ways you can do that even more and better. And so for one example, can there be applications? People are all about their phones and applications. Is there something more? I know there's Channel 11 and things, but any way you can get out to the community. Does it require having people go out to the community in night meetings and say more things, which I have that experience of doing that, being out and going to those night meetings. For instance, I'm doing jail court. It's a courtroom in the jail where these are in custodies, and we're constantly seeing if we can have case resolution at an early stage, because early case resolution helps defendants get on with their lives. We don't want to be a stopping block. We want them to be able to not miss work, childcare, education, get the rehabilitation they need, assess what is the issue, what do they need, and do that. If we can, if victim rights have been fulfilled, if the defendant wants to do a plea. And for example, I've thought, I've waited, and it's also a money saver. I mean, that's secondary, but it is a money saver too, less litigation. And I've thought, can we bring that to out of custody setting? At the arraignment, it would take getting the stakeholders together, defense, court, prosecutor's office, to make sure that we have the reports ready. Victim notice has been fulfilled, so that we could bring that same early case resolution that is so good for everyone in the system to an earlier stage. So yes, I have the experience and the track record, and I'm familiar that you always have to be with an open mind, and that experience is invaluable, and always be thinking, what's working, what's not, can we take it to another part in the system, another part in the court system.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you, Councilmember Williams. At the present time, we have 20 judges that sit on our bench. What uniqueness would you bring to our bench?
And those 20 judges are, what's great is that they do have such a swath of experience and variety, and they understand those issues, and it would just be thrilling to go and learn from them. But what I would bring is I have a passion for the criminal justice and this city, and I would bring assets to the bench because of my experience combined with what I'm known for is my demeanor and how I carry myself in the system. What it takes to be a good judge is, you need to have a knowledge of the legal issues. I definitely have that. Again, the 25 years handling all kinds of cases. Secondly, you have to have the proper demeanor. And I have that track record. You must be patient, empathetic, diligent, competent. Those are words that my colleagues and people from the defense bar would use to describe me. So knowledge, demeanor, you have to have good communication skills. I have spoken and interacted with thousands of unrepresented defendants and victims in the system. It never gets old to me. I enjoy in communicating with the public, with our community members. When they come in and they're scared or confused, you have to be a good communicator and lay out clearly in understandable terms their options. And it's rewarding when you see that you've helped people. So that's the third thing. You have to do it for the right reasons. In my career, it's always been that I want to help people by achieving justice, bringing about change, and helping bring solutions to the community. And I have all those things that would be an asset. Just holistically, I would bring that to the bench. And then I could continue to do what I've already been doing for the quarter of a century to the fair and impartial branch of government.
Thank you so much. And any closing remarks?
So again, this is just an honor to be interviewed. I thank you for taking the time to do that. It would be the pinnacle of my career if I could now go forth and take that step to all the experience I have. It would be wonderful to be able to continue to solve problems in the community, whether it be one community member at a time. You turn one person's life around, it improves the entire community. It would just be wonderful to be able to bring that to the bench at this time in my career. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And the next person we're interviewing is... Okay. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
Want to take a couple minutes just to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, sure. My name is Erica Radke. I'm originally from Chicago, but a friend of mine invited us out to Phoenix in the mid-90s, and we liked it so much we started visiting every other year. In fact, when she moved away, we continued to visit and just stay in a hotel. So when my husband got an opportunity to get a job here, we decided to move here and put down roots. I've been married 25 years to my best friend. We have 2 girls. My older daughter is at ASU. She lives at home and goes to campus. And we have a younger daughter in high school. As far as hobbies, we like to go to the Herberger Theater, art museums, sometimes stay home and play board games, and really just enjoy each other here as a family. In terms of professionally, I've been a litigator for 25 years. My background has been really varied in terms of I've represented defendants as well as applicants. I've represented corporations, people. I've worked at a large law firm as well as for the federal government. And also I was a solo practitioner for a number of years. And really, I sort of look at every job change as a way of putting tools in my tool belt for my ultimate goal, which was to become a judge. So I am currently Vice Chief Administrative Law Judge at the Industrial Commission, where I not only handle an active caseload, but also manage a large staff. And in addition to that, recently our chief judge was on an extended sick leave, and I was asked to be the acting chief judge as well. So I've got a lot of litigation experience as well as a lot of judicial experience. And one thing that I saw that is very similar is the type of cases that we handle at the Industrial Commission. It's a fast-paced, heavy caseload, very diverse population, often individuals that are unrepresented. And I believe that's the same type of caseload as here at the municipal court.
Thank you so much. Vice Mayor, any questions?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for that. In your career so far, what has been the most difficult legal issue you have encountered, and how did you handle it?
Well, I would say for me, the most difficult legal issue I encountered would have been when I was a solo practitioner. The main reason I decided to do that is that I was practicing part-time while raising my kids at home. So I worked, and when I would go to see my clients, I would visit them at their homes. So the issue that would become difficult is that you're at the client's home, you're trying to talk to them about their case, and it would become like a joint project. Everybody would want to weigh in, including the parents and siblings, and then it would be difficult in order to make sure that you carve out a space to let the family understand that I'm the attorney, I'm the one that's in charge of the case. I absolutely appreciate your input, but that I'm the one that'll be the one deciding trial strategy. And I'm thinking of a case in particular where there is an individual here in Arizona with a significant mental impairment and some physical impairments. And his family had fired the first attorney. And then they came to me, and the dad, because of the trouble with the first attorney, the dad was very, very aggressive, very, very involved. And I really had to sit down and talk to him and tell him, I understand the condition with your son. I empathize. I'm here to fight for him on his behalf. However, I need you to step back. You've given me all the information that you know about his case, but now it's time for you to just not stay in your lane, but just relax and let me handle the case from here. And I found that, and he did, he ultimately did. I need to have that direct conversation with him. And I did win the case, and ever since then, we've actually stayed in semi-contact with each other. And I'm even going to be officiating his second wedding, the dad's second wedding, coming up this month.
Second question, how would someone from the opposing side describe you?
Vice Mayor, would it be okay if I answered that in terms of how the litigants would view me as a judge, since I'm currently practicing, or do you want it as when I was practicing?
Whichever, whatever you think, your personality, who you are,
Okay.
your reputation, like how would other people describe you?
I think that the litigants in court, they would describe me as a judge. I think they would say that I'm fair, I'm impartial, and that I run a good courtroom. And what I mean by that is that, to me, when you're on the bench, I want to make sure that the litigants are heard, that they have the opportunity to tell their story, and that they know that by word and by deed that I'm going to be fair, that I'm paying attention, and that I'm going to apply the law to the facts, and then issue a decision, and that I'll be able to explain that decision to them if they do have questions, and that it's not going to be something that is just abstract or just came from out of left field. So I believe that's what they would say about me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Garcia.
Hello.
Hi.
So can you give an example of a time, according to your values, that you've pushed for or accomplished systematic change?
You know, as being in management at the Industrial Commission, I've been able to spearhead a lot of different initiatives that have been able to cut costs and save time for our division. I'm thinking in terms specifically of one thing that I was in charge of was there's something called a further hearing. At the Industrial Commission, you have the initial hearing where the injured worker or alleged injured worker will testify. And then the second part is where the doctors will come in to testify. And that's called a further hearing. And the issue was that further hearings weren't being set readily at all. Usually, once you have the initial hearing, because of everybody's schedule, you'll have a further hearing. The earliest you can get it is 3 months out. But I'd found out that secretaries weren't setting hearings they might not even start setting the hearings for 6 months out. So we got complaints from the workers' compensation community that, it was taking too long for these cases to move forward. So what I did is, as a manager of the secretaries, is I talked to them and I established a protocol with them that you needed to set a further hearing within no more than 21 days of when you received that assignment. And the way I came about that, it wasn't something that I just put on top of them. You have to work with the team. So I got a smaller team together, particularly the trainer of the secretaries, as well as one of the secretaries that did a really good job setting hearings, and then a couple of volunteers. And we got together and we worked out a protocol or system based on what the person that set further hearings did really well. And then we brought that to the team and gave them a sort of a trial period. That I told them, look, you got 3 weeks to use this. Give us any feedback you like. We'll make any tweaks we can. But after that, this is going to be the new process so that we can move these hearings forward. And I did talk to them in terms of we want to serve the community well. That's why I'm asking you to do this faster, not just because I want it done faster, but the community needs to get these hearings accomplished so that they can get their decision. And after that, we've had that protocol in place for about 2 years now, and there are no more complaints from the community. As a matter of fact, they have reached they've never been over 21 days in the last year and a half. So it's been a great process. It's something that we check every month, and it's been very effective.
Thank you, Councilman Garcia. Councilmember Williams?
If you're appointed, how will you evaluate the efficiency of the court processes and determine any changes that could be made to improve the court?
You know, like, as I was saying, in management at the commission, we look a lot at the different processes in order to see how we can tweak them in order to make them more efficient. But in here, if I were appointed here, I would look at it, I think you should look at it as a consumer of the court. Like, as a matter of fact, I was, luckily I had jury duty last month, and I was actually ended up appointed, not appointed, selected to be on a jury, and I was the foreperson of a shoplifting trial. And from there, I got a chance to see the court operations as a juror, of course, sort of from the back end. And I think that that's how you should look at it, not sort of necessarily view the process always as the judge or even necessarily as the lawyer, but as one of the community members that comes in to use the court. And, you know, in terms of changes, I think you need to be gradual with them. You can't come in and run roughshod over people because there are established procedures that maybe you don't know why they're there. You just see that they're inefficient. You need to be humble. You need to talk to people and gradually bring in changes where you feel that they would be appropriate. And this is really a good court system. I mean, that was one of the things I noticed when I was here as a juror. You know, between the specialty courts, the CAP program, there's so much that's done well here. And I think it's important for the court to address the needs of the community, and that's what I see that they're doing. One change I would think that could be investigated might be some form of alternative dispute resolution. I wasn't sure if that was something that was being actively used here, and that would be a way to make sure that cases are also being processed more quickly, because if you can resolve it through mediation, then it doesn't necessarily have to go through the judge.
And I think you pretty much explained, but I'm going to ask anyway, how do you view the judge's role in managing a court docket?
I have been going on, but it's a passion of mine. I don't look at being a judge as just a job. You know, it's a vocation. It's important to me. I do feel that you should be active in managing your docket. It should not just be the secretary's burden. The two of the secretary and the judge should really work together to make sure that those cases are moving through the system as quickly yet effectively as possible. And I know personally with my secretary, we've got a system where I don't type, I do the drag and speak. So I will make a decision, I'll do that, and, you know, edit it as best I can, and then I give it to her, and then I'll start the next one, because we have a fast-moving courtroom. So while she's fixing that one up and making it pretty, I'm going on to the next. So we work together in that way, just to make sure that we're staying on track.
Thank you, Councilmember Williams. So we have about 20 judges on the bench right now. What's so unique? What uniqueness would you bring to that bench? Right?
You're like, what's so special about you? Well, I do have a varied background. It is not just the traditional background necessarily that comes to this kind of court. And I think it's important to respect and bring in different points of view, because I think that that is a way to make sure that you're not static and using the same old ideas. So definitely the fact that I have practiced in different areas as well as representing both sides of the aisle. I do have 6 years of judicial experience, including being a manager and also in terms of spearheading different projects. And I think that I would be able to leverage the skills that I've learned and acquired over the years in order to be an asset to the court. And I would really like to do that if possible.
Thank you so much. Any closing remarks?
Just briefly, thank all of you for taking the time to review all of this information. I know it's a lot, and to talk to all of us. I really appreciate your time. And I did bring portfolios for each of you that really touch on a lot of the issues that we talked about today. There's my judicial philosophies in here. There's some metrics in terms of that further hearing process we discussed. Also, my performance evaluations. I'm proud to say that I've exceeded expectations on all of my evaluations, but for the first one, I was only there 2 months then, so they didn't know what I could do, as well as some just accomplishments that I've done as a judge, and I'd like to give you this as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. I really appreciate your time.
All right. And the next person would be Bob Smith. Good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing?
Good.
So just to open up, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. First of all, Chairman Nowakowski, Vice Mayor, Councilwoman, and Councilman, thank you for this honor and privilege to interview before you today. I would just like you to know that this is not my first time applying. I've been dedicated and committed to becoming a judge, but not just anywhere, for this court, the court that I've basically grown up in. I've worked my entire career in the City of Phoenix Court. What I would like you to know about myself is that I was born and raised in Phoenix, actually not too far, a stone's throw from here. Some of you may know, some of you may not remember that there was Phoenix Memorial Hospital. That was where I was born. I've either lived or worked my entire life in the city of Phoenix, except when I went to law school. I went to law school at U of A, so I am a wildcat for law school. So I came from a family of 7 kids through a blended family. My dad came here for work in the 50s, my mom in the 60s. Part of why I want to be a judge is I've always believed in being a public servant. My mom was a public servant. I'm the first in my family to get a 4-year degree. To this day, of the 7 kids, only one other individual from my family got a degree from a 4-year school, and that was my brother. I'm the youngest. I'm the baby in the family. Sometimes they say save the best for last. That's what my mom told me. But my dad never got a college degree. My mom went to what she called at the time PC, Phoenix College, now Phoenix Community College, but we always called it PC. She studied hard and became a nurse by actually studying in a trailer in a lot on our house, where our house was. There was a trailer. She and a friend became lifelong friends because they studied for nursing school together. My mom, the reason why I point out public service is she came from a very low socioeconomic background. Her mother passed when she was 3. She grew up in upstate New York, and she had a dream of being a lawyer, but it never panned out for her. She had kids at a young age, and so when she went to nursing school, she wanted to continue somehow to be a public servant. So she went to work at County Hospital. After that, she went to work at the Phoenix Indian Medical Center that's still there. So for 30 years, she was either for the county government, helping the most needy, and still today, the county hospital serves everybody that comes through the doors. Then she went to the Phoenix Indian Medical Center. And so that inspired in me to be a public servant. As I was growing up, I had service jobs working as a dishwasher, busboy, then eventually became a sales associate at what used to be Diamonds, now it's Dillard's. That's where I met my wife, love of my life, and now we've been married almost 30 years. It will be 30 this May. So I was able to study hard and get into ASU and went through their Justice Studies program, and so I'm a Sun Devil. So I will tell you now that I can be fair and impartial to either Wildcats or Sun Devils. If I was raised here, so I'm a Sun Devil, but if the Wildcats aren't playing the Sun Devils, I will root for them as well. So, but in law school, I did clinical programs in their trial practice. I wanted to be a trial attorney, but I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be a public servant. So I worked for the city attorney's office in Tucson. When I came out, the economy was kind of rough. I applied to multiple jobs, but one place that I always heard great things about was the City of Phoenix prosecutor's office. Had the best training in the state. And so I applied there. They said, wait till you pass the bar. Passed it first time and got hired. I was very blessed to be hired there. I've been there, as I said, almost 26 years. And throughout my career as a prosecutor, I've been fair and also treated everybody that I encounter with dignity and respect. The court House employees that I work with every day, from interpreters, staff, judges, opposing counsel, witnesses, everyone. That's always been my practice. I believe you'll hear my reputation precedes me that I'm fair with everybody, and I believe that would translate well to the bench because you have to treat individuals with dignity, respect, and fairness, have an open mind, listen, and that's what I practice as an attorney. In order to be a problem solver, you have to listen to people, not tell them what they need to do, listen to them, and then help solve the problems. So that's just a little bit about myself.
Thank you so much. Vice Mayor, any questions?
Yes. In your career so far, what has been the most difficult legal issue you have to encounter, and how did you handle it?
The most legal or difficult issue that I encountered was something that dealt with a lot of pressure, a lot of outside pressure. And I think what's important to note from that when I tell you about it is that I was able to withstand that pressure because as a judge, you have to be independent of outside pressure. I had a situation where there was a case that involved a property in the community, and there was interest from the city, there was community interest, and a lot of pressure throughout my office and even through higher levels of the city to go after this property owner with criminal charges. I took the time to assess the property and wanted to look at all different avenues to see whether we could do civil charges, whether we could even not go to prosecution or do charges. Could it be resolved by sitting down with the property owner, sitting down with the community leaders, what could be resolved? And as a prosecutor, the reason why it was a tough legal issue is we can't go on cases without probable cause. I didn't feel as an attorney, and this was in my career probably after about 10 years, so I was a veteran attorney at the time, but I didn't feel that I had the probable cause to do criminal charges. I wanted to step back and see other problem-solving methods. That wasn't the avenue that my superiors wanted to take, and the case was taken away from me, was given to another person to handle. And the ironic thing is, in the end, no criminal charges were ever filed. It was resolved short of court and through settlement and talking with the neighbors as I wanted to do. So the hard part about that was the humbling experience of I stuck to my guns with my ethics, but the case was taken away from me, and that's was hard.
Another question, and you kind of talked about this a little bit. So how would someone from the opposing side describe you?
I think they would describe me as reasonable, as calm, having a calm demeanor, reasonable, and willing to listen. That throughout my career, working with all individuals and especially opposing counsel, I'm open to listen. Even to this day, about 5 years ago, was able to be elevated into a supervisor leadership position, and I'll still have individuals call me up from the defense bar and say, Bob, what would you do on this? You know, what would be the city prosecutor's office position on this? Because I've already talked to some other attorneys, maybe they're getting a dead end, but they would tell me that you're reasonable, you'll listen, and I think that's how my reputation would precede me, is the ability to listen, have an open mind, to be fair, and come to a reasoned solution on a case. And not just with defense counsel, with the judges on the bench in our court and city court, interpreters, witnesses, police officers, fire department, throughout and across the board would tell you the same thing, that I'm fair and reasonable, willing to listen, and it's important the way I treat everybody is with dignity and respect. Because at the end of the day, I've always believed in you get what you give, that you need to treat individuals with respect if you want to be respected. So as a judge, I would also do the same thing, because whether an individual has an attorney, whether they're appearing before me on their own, if I don't respect them, how are they going to return respect? And I've always, that's what I think, back to your question, is that defense attorneys would share that I'm reasonable, respectful, courteous, and calm and professional.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilmember Garcia.
Hello.
Hello.
So can you give an example of a time that, according to your values, you've pushed for or accomplished systematic change?
I think the best example would be years ago, a fellow prosecutor and I worked with a police detective to try to help and deal with issues where we had repeat offenders, individuals that for quality of life crimes, whether it be trespassing, at the time, police were calling it panhandling, they're out on the street, and they kept on coming to court, going to jail, going back out in the street, coming to court. What could we do to make a difference? Because I'm a firm believer that whatever the issue is we're dealing with, whether it's homelessness, individuals on the street, you have to look at the root cause. Is it mental health issues? Is it substance abuse? What's going on here? So long before we had Phoenix Cares, long before we had the other programs in the city, this was back in about 2007, this fellow prosecutor and I and a police detective worked out a program where he would go contact individuals in the jail and offer them services, offer them housing, offer them counseling, rehabilitation, anything that would help them. And we had basically a pilot project of where the individuals would, when they were released, they'd get a third-party release to a provider, and the detective would follow up and make sure they got released, and then they would come back to court to see the judge, and they would have their steps that they had accomplished in correcting their situation, whether, again, the housing and paying off fines, things of that nature. And I still remember an individual that was so proud that he came to me with a tattered note page where he was marking down his community service hours, and eventually his time was suspended, all fines were suspended. Again, that was a predecessor to what we have now with recidivist cases, AMRO, Phoenix Cares reaching out, offering services first, which is a great program, but this was a systematic change that was kind of like the predecessor and the birth to that.
Thank you, Member Garcia. Councilmember Williams?
If appointed, how will you evaluate the efficiency of the court's processes and determine what changes could be made to make it more efficient?
I think it's real important, that's a great question, Councilwoman, is that because time is precious for everyone, and justice isn't fair if it's not efficient. And how I would evaluate that is to look at the size of the dockets, to see how they're proceeding, and whether cases are being resolved timely and fairly. For example, if there are maybe excessive amounts of continuance, I mean, each case has to be evaluated on an individual basis to see if there is a basis for that continuance. But if the dockets were building up in size compared to other courts, so I'd want to run statistics. I know we're getting more and more advanced in the technological age to be able to run statistics on how long cases would stay in a courtroom, things of that nature, but not at the price or cost of fairness or justice. I think it's real important that you have to have a balance. Yeah, I would have to evaluate how cases are proceeding, but again, it wouldn't be a matter of that you just speed up to be expedient for the sake of justice. It has to be timely, but it also has to be reasonably analyzed and looked at to make sure you're treating an individual with that fairness, dignity, and respect. You're not rushing to a decision. If I needed to take time for a case, say take it under advisement, I think it's also always important to communicate, to tell the parties when you're going to have a decision, why, what it's going to take, if there's new case law they brought before you, and that if any reason you had to extend your decision time, that you would let them know that this is going to be the new time frame when I will render a decision. So I think you have to, again, look at statistics, but you have to be careful to balance to make sure you're not sacrificing fairness and justice for time.
In your role as judge, how would you manage the docket to, to be efficient and to hold lawyers responsible?
As an attorney in the city court, I was always had a reputation of being efficient. I would get through pretrial conferences efficiently, timely, and I think how I would handle it is to make sure that I'm a person that shows up on time, I show up early. I would make sure that I'm there, I take the bench, and I would acknowledge everyone. And if cases weren't ready to come back to me, I would just let them know. Again, I think you need to have an appearance right at the docket time, 8:30, 10, 1:30, 3 o'clock for your dockets to let them know you're there, not just sit back in chambers waiting for things to come to you. Come out, greet all the parties, let them know the attorneys are talking to individuals. And if it was a situation where counsel weren't moving things along efficiently, timely, and it was a repetitive thing, I would make sure that it was both parties. So it's not ex parte, that I'm talking to both sides and just ask them if there's any issues with my court. Am I doing something that's causing things to delay, staff, things like that, to make sure that it's a partnership with all the partners to talk about what's happening. And so if there was a particular attorney that was having issues, again, I would talk with all the parties, the attorneys present, and just see what we can do to help them out if there's any issues. with it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Williams. So currently, we have about 28 judges on the bench. What uniqueness would you bring to the bench?
Chairman, the uniqueness that I would bring is my diversity of experience, and basically that I would bring the complete package to the table. And what I mean is, I'm somebody that I'm humble, I'm modest. It's hard to compare myself, but I would, if I was a betting man, wager that I have unparalleled experience in my scope and breadth of anyone before you today in the city court, in this particular court where you're looking for a judge. That my 26 years are not just sitting up in a tower from a leadership position. I was 20 years on the front lines in court, in trial, and out in the community. I think what's really important, what I bring that's unique, you may have other individuals that have come before you that have worked in our community prosecution area, but I would venture to say not as long as I have, but not the depth that I have. My career was bookended by two very large, prominent cases that impacted Phoenix. Early in my career, 2 years out as an attorney, I handled the Sherwin Sarafi case that at the time was branded a slumlord. He had 40 properties in the city. I took it upon myself, went out with inspectors, police officers, visited his property. There was standing raw sewage that residents were having to live in. Again, back to what I said earlier, it's important to talk to the residents to find out what they need, what's harming them. And it was obvious, but they let me know they didn't have utilities, some of them. They had raw sewage, cockroaches. We marshaled through NSD, other city partners, police, fire, got cases that were filed on that. And in the end of the day, it turns out that by fortune, whatever, he also had some Social Security issues, and the feds went after him. He dissolved himself of any properties in the city of Phoenix and left the city. Recently in my career, when I was still a frontline community prosecutor in 2012 through 2015, you might have heard about the Woodbridge case. I handled a very large in District 5 apartment complex that it came to our attention because there was a lack of air conditioning. So it started out with when they wouldn't comply, because again, we lead with information education. We don't want to rush to prosecution. So the inspectors talked with the property owners. It became clear they were milking the property for as much profit they could get out of it with the least amount in. Seems to fit the definition of a slumlord. So those civil charges happened for lack of air conditioning. Eventually, when the inspectors were out there, they saw dilapidated conditions, failing chair rails where kids could fall and get hurt. Wood was falling apart on railings on balconies where people could get seriously hurt. And so we ended up having to go criminal, in the end, it became the largest case that I would bet in City of Phoenix history. We had a trial that lasted 4 months, 30 days of testimony, plus sentencing, a $3 million fine that forced them to get into compliance. And they paid a fine that was ordered to by the city court, even with compliance, of $450,000. So again, a giant case for the city. And so that's just part of what I would bring to the table. In that case, we went out and met with the community because there actually were refugees and immigrants, people that were living there that had been located there for the housing, and they were taken advantage, and there was actually testimony that was brought out by the defense saying that it was the residents' fault because they were unclean people. It was outrageous. What else I would bring to the table is the years of experience in this particular court, that I'm ready to go to work as a judge on this bench because I've been able to do 26 years almost in the court, 25 and a half, and have always carried myself, again, with treating people with dignity and respect, and that I would transfer that to the bench, that you have to be fair on the bench, you have to listen, because if you're really going to make a difference, you're going to listen to people and treat them with civility, professional dignity, and respect, and I would bring that all to the table.
And any closing remarks?
I want to thank you all again for having me before you. I would want to make sure that you understand that the reason why I'm applying to be a judge is I prepared myself, as said, for years for this position. I've applied before. It's not my first time, and I believe I have the full complement to be a fair and effective judge in the city of Phoenix. I'm passionate about what the court is doing. In our court, we have specialty courts that I have the privilege of supervising and overseeing the specialty courts with our Veterans Court, the Behavioral Health Court, and that is the point of getting to the root cause of what causes individuals to have trouble and to try to get them back on the right path of restorative justice. Our driving on suspended license court, it's very critical. The legislature chose to decriminalize the suspended license so now individuals can get their licenses back. But as a judge, I would take the way I've behaved as a prosecutor, as an attorney, and in the court with all people to the bench, that you have to make sure that, and what I would do is treat people with procedural due process. They would have notice, opportunity to be heard by a neutral, I would be a neutral, open-minded, fair judge. Also, procedural justice, that their voice is heard, that they have an understanding and expectation through communication. I let them know why they're in court, that I would be a neutral party, and also retreat them all with everybody with respect, whether that's a party, a lawyer, a juror, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity.
Mr. Smith, thank you so much. Is there a motion to go into executive session?
Motion.
Okay, is the person here? Yes. We have
There was a motion. You just.
Rachel? Is Rachel here? Yeah.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much for allowing me an opportunity just to make a public comment. My name is Rachel Frazier Johnson, and I am an attorney here in Phoenix. I am a proud U of A Wildcat, undergraduate and law school. But I live in a world of Sun Devils, and I, of course, respect Sun Devils and all that you are doing to make Phoenix a wonderful community in which to live and raise a family. I wanted to just take a moment to speak on behalf of two of the candidates who have applied to be a judge here at the City of Phoenix. I want to let you know a little bit about myself just for a couple minutes, just for framework. I am a complete public servant when it comes to the City of Phoenix. I know a couple of you, I'm sorry I didn't greet you properly, Chairman, council members, Vice Mayor, and the rest of the staff that is present today. I am a person who serves on the Arts and Culture Commission. I am the vice chair. You guys have heard me come up and speak countless times at budget hearings. In addition to that, I am a person who has a private law firm in town, so I understand what management and organization is about and the necessary leadership that it takes in order to be a judge and to run a courtroom. I also serve on the Village Planning Commission as the chair for downtown City of Phoenix. This is my universe downtown every single day. I work here all day, every day. Even though I don't necessarily live in this community, I live in the chairman's community. With all of that being said, I am also a pro tem judge. I've served as a pro tem judge since 2002. So when I stand here as somebody who is a litigator and an attorney, I am standing from a place of reference that I can tell you what it takes to be a judge. I give my unequivocal support to Frankie Jones and Mina Mendez. Ms. Jones, I currently work with her at Maricopa County Superior Court across the street handling juvenile matters. Both of us have a background handling criminal cases, me on the defense side. With all of that being said, Frankie is a fantastic person who I believe should be considered for a judicial position. She has the appropriate judicial temperament. She is prepared. She is knowledgeable. She is who she says she is. When you saw her here today, that's who you get is Frankie. Miss Jones, pardon me. So then there's also Mina Mendez. Mina Mendez and I met each other in law school, and I had the utmost respect for her then. When I moved up to Phoenix, she was a commissioner at the time. She has served this community, Maricopa County, as a commissioner very well. She is highly respected, just as Miss Jones is, and she has given of herself and her talents as not only a mentor, but also as somebody who has helped other folks who are interested in becoming a judge have that opportunity. So I just wanted all of you to know that these people, I think they were very kind and very humble, for lack of a better word. These are shining stars in our community, and I believe they will do the City of Phoenix well. Thank you for your time, and I apologize for going.
Oh, no problem.
You need a motion to go into executive session, and I so move.
Second.
All right, we have a motion to go into executive session. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries. We'll be back hopefully in 15 minutes or so. All right, we want to welcome everyone back to the Public Safety Justice Committee. Is there a motion to bring us back?
Yes, I have a motion to bring us back out of executive session.
All right, there's a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries. Well, let me tell you that this was one of the hardest. I've been a council member for 12 years, on this subcommittee for about 8 or 9 years, and this was probably the hardest decisions that we had to make as a team up here. We've spent about almost a good hour and basically going through each and every one of y'all, and I just want to thank you. I want to thank you for being the public service servant that you guys are, for everything you've done for our community, making the city of Phoenix so great. And it'll be a pleasure to have you all serve on our board, but today we're just going to have to choose two. So with that, I'll welcome a motion.
Mr. Chair, I will make the motion. I move that the Public Safety and Justice Subcommittee recommend the City Council appoint the following individuals as judges of the Phoenix Municipal Court. Alex Navidad for a term to expire July 12th, 2021, and Patricia George for a term to expire on January 1st, 2022. And if a judicial vacancy occurs within the next 60 days, the subcommittee recommends that Frankie Jones be appointed as the judge of the Phoenix Municipal Court for a term to expire on January 17, 2022.
Okay, we have a motion. Any discussion on that motion? Or is there a second? I'm sorry.
Second.
All right, we have a second. Any discussion on that second? Any cards from the public? Nope. Okay, with that, all those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations to you all. And once again, thank you all for applying. It was just such a hard decision. And once again, congratulations to those individuals.
Mr. Chairman?
Meetings, we got one more future agenda items?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, future agenda items on the next docket, we will have immigration enforcement and review of Ops Order 448. There is also a presentation regarding the Air Fleet Consultant. There'll be a neighborhood block watch update report, and also there'll be a presentation report on the homeless court from municipal court.
For my colleagues, is there anything else you would like to add to the future agenda items?
Yes, I wanted to add a presentation from this Block Watch Super Moms. They wanted to come in and give a presentation, just fatalities on 75th Avenue. And what is it that we can do moving forward when it comes to signage and addressing a lot of the pedestrian issues that we have, specifically on 75th Avenue.
Alrighty, and if we could get that as...
Before you adjourn,
Absolutely.
I believe we are losing a regular member of this committee. This is his last. Milton, I believe you're retiring.
Yes.
You have been a great asset to this community over the years, and we truly appreciate your advice and your commitment to public safety. So thank you for all the hard work you've done.
Thank you.
Milton, as a chair, I think, as a chair, I know that we've given you a lot of headaches, and we've always added agenda items sometimes on the 11th hour that you're always able to make it happen. And I just really want to thank you and your staff for all your hard work and all your service to the city of Phoenix and making us that 5th largest city in the city of Phoenix and the best ran also. Thank you. Any other comments? With that, meeting's adjourned. Thank you.